£1,000 in tax-free cash is like having over £4,000 each month to play with for a whole year. And it could be yours in the biggest Great British giveaway so far. That could be a holiday each month, your mortgage covered, or just the ability to send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Our next guest has a rather unique career story. She was working at a pub, aged 18, and Holly Farmer was spotted by a modelling scout, and it turned out to be her lucky day.
Scott Yoss-Clark sent this message to Holly.
Holly, 18, 5'10", she does not belong in a pub. And I absolutely love that, Holly, because it's a bit like Dirty Dancing, where it's like, you can't put baby in the corner. Holly does not belong in a pub. You belong on the catwalk. What was that moment like for you when you were scouted by yours?
It was crazy. I have to say I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. Like, I was just on my lunch break. I was working at a pub, so... yeah, I was on my lunch break walking, going to Primark and...
You're going to Primark?
Got stopped by yours.
How did that interaction go?
Well, first question was, how tall are you? So, 5'10".
Very much that.
Yeah, then he gave me his card and asked, like, explained everything, that he's a model scout, obviously.
Yeah, because generally when I scout, especially when I get close to that person, I tend to look in their eyes, and when you see something there, it's like everything works on the face, and then the eyes gives you away.
Well, you've spotted a gem in Holly. I mean, you can tell even when you walked in, you are built to be a model.
I did my first fashion week here in London and then went to Paris, and it was really fun.
Wow.
Now it's my full-time job. It's a bit crazy, to be honest,
Wow.
to be able to say that modelling is my full-time job now. Some brands will ask you to be a bit more serious, and then others not.
So it depends on the client's request as well. Ellie, give us your best model face, ready? 3, I wonder if we can come back. 3, 2, 1. Very nice.
High fashion.
Yeah.
But you guys do all, like, contorted moves, don't you?
Yeah.
Like all this high fashion. Do yours?
I'm just permanently living in model
You actually
model
are,
world.
though. He actually
This
does.
is it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock on Saturday, the 4th of January, and this is the weekend on GB News. Now, we've got a packed show for you. Sir Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone I know, says a grooming gang whistleblower who has accused the Prime Minister of widespread failure in his handling of the scandal. I'll be joined by a police and crime commissioner this hour. And Reform UK are rallying in Kemi Badenoch's constituency this afternoon as Nigel Farage promises the gloves are off. The gathering comes as an election predictor says Reform are just 6 points off becoming the biggest party in Parliament. And it's January, so blizzards are set to batter Britain as fresh weather warnings are issued by the Met Office. It comes as the NHS tells the public not to go outside, in the early morning or late at night. Do we all need to get a bit of a grip, though? And 17-year-old superstar Luke Littler makes history by becoming the youngest ever darts world champion with a crushing 7-3 victory over Michael van Gerwen at Alexandra Palace last night. I'll be getting the latest reaction on that story. I'm Dawn Neeson, and the weekend starts right here and now. So So welcome to Saturday. Congratulations, you made it. We're in 2025. It is a Saturday. It is the 4th of January, and I'm very grateful for your company today. It's nearly time to take the Christmas decorations down if you haven't done so yet, but you've got a couple of hours just to sit and ignore the baubles, put your feet up and watch the show. It's a cracker. Now, this show is nothing without you and your views. It's the most important part of the show, especially a show like we've got today. It is absolutely jam-packed. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/your say and join in our conversation. Please do that. It's so important. Big stories coming up. Keeping me company this hour is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. Thank you very much for joining me, and I bet you've sorted your Christmas trees out already, unlike some of us. But before we get stuck into today's stories, here's the news with the wonderful Sophia Wenzel.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. These are your headlines. King Charles is deeply saddened by the death of a British man who was killed when an alleged Islamic State supporter drove a truck into crowds celebrating New Year in New Orleans. 31-year-old Edward Pettifer is believed to be the stepson of Prince William and Prince Harry's nanny when they were younger, known as Tiggy. The King has been in touch with Mr Pettifer's family to share his personal condolences. Meanwhile, the FBI believe the man who drove the truck is believed to have acted alone. Shamsuddin Jabbar's rented truck rammed into crowds in New Orleans, killing 14 and injuring dozens. This comes as the FBI says there is no definitive link between that attack and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas, after the driver was confirmed as active-duty American soldier Matthew Livelsberger. GB News can reveal that the first boatload of 50 illegal migrants this year has crossed the English Channel. A Border Force vessel picked up 50 migrants from their small boat early this morning and drove them back to Dover. It comes after nearly 37,000 people made the treacherous journey in small boats last year. In other news, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has said the gloves are off and vows to ramp up his campaigning efforts in Kemi Badenoch's constituency of North West Essex. It follows claims from the Conservative leader that Reform's online membership tracker was fake, despite several news outlets reporting they had seen the party's membership data and believed the tracker is accurate. Speaking ahead of his racecourse rally in Badenoch's constituency, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage said the Tory leader had her chance.
I gave her an opportunity to apologise for what has now been thoroughly disproven in the media, and she's chosen not to take the opportunity. Although that's not surprising, she's not exactly known for her charm. So what to do? What to do? Well, it's all well and good saying sue her, but you have to prove actual harm. She hasn't harmed us. She's given us tens of thousands more members.
Meanwhile, the former Conservative MP for Dudley North, Marco Longhi, has defected to Reform after accusing the Conservative Party of becoming unrecognisable. It comes as the Reform UK leader has distanced himself from Elon Musk's support for Tommy Robinson. Nigel Farage has said Robinson is not what we need after Elon Musk praised the imprisoned right-wing activist. Mr Musk, the tech billionaire and supporter of Mr Farage, retweeted posts on X describing Robinson as a political prisoner and separately said Britain needs reform now. The UK is braced for heavy snow and icy rain this weekend, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption to come. 2 amber and 2 yellow alerts have been issued by the Met Office across most of the country, with up to 30 centimetres of snow expected. Forecasters say power cuts are likely and that vehicles could become stranded on roads as wintry conditions continue. Trains and flights could also be delayed or cancelled. A judge has ordered Donald Trump to be sentenced next week in his New York hush money case, but he has suggested the US president-elect will not be jailed. In the shock move, the sentencing has been set for the 10th of January, just 10 days before the presidential inauguration. Trump's spokesperson called the case lawless and a witch hunt in a statement released after the date was announced. And Luke Littler has made darting history with a 7-3 victory over Michael van Gerwen to become the youngest ever PDC World Championship winner. The 17-year-old raced to a 4-0 lead over Michael van der Gerwen, and despite van der Gerwen getting 3 sets on the board, he never really threatened a comeback. It was success at the second opportunity for Littler, who lost last year's final aged 16.
As soon as that winning double went in, I knew back-to-back finals. But yeah, just finish here. Speaking to you guys, it's just chill out, reset the batteries and go again tomorrow.
105 average there, some incredible finishes. When you're playing at that level, do you feel unbeatable up there?
I felt very, very confident tonight. I wouldn't say the best I felt was against Nathan in the quarterfinals. But I'm just glad that I'm playing with confidence.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophia, and good afternoon to everybody out there. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, especially all our regulars who are already getting in touch. Grumpy Grandad, good afternoon. Grumpy, hope you're having a lovely Saturday out there. Now, we have got a jam-packed show, including some really good exclusives for you, including a Nigel Farage exclusive, so you want to hang around for that one. So let's get straight into today's show, Zoe. Sir Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs, according to whistleblower and amazing woman Maggie Oliver, who helped expose the grooming gang scandal originally. The former Greater Manchester police detective has uncovered widespread abuse in Rochdale, and she had no faith that the Prime Minister wanted to get to the truth and find out once and for all, holding those responsible and fully accountable. Joining me now is Donna Jones, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Donna, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Really appreciate your time on this story. Now, it's a story that's been going on for decades. For decades, we've had inquiries, we've had probes, we've had all sorts of things. Nothing's been done, though. So do we now, once and for all, need an all-encompassing inquiry to get to the bottom of this and finally hold those responsible to account?
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for having me on to talk about such an important topic once again on GB News. And well done to GB News for keeping with this really, really important national story. You know, I was on GB 2 days ago talking about the need for a national inquiry, but actually I just want to caveat why I support that. You've just said that there have been multiple investigations carried out by the councils themselves, which is the right thing for them to do. And Jess Phillips, in some part, is correct in what she's saying to Oldham. Look at what went wrong and then fix it. The reason I support a national inquiry here is because this has not happened in one place. We've heard about Oldham, we've heard about Telford, we've heard about Oxford and Rochdale and the other one, the name escapes me, but there have been 5 or 6 cities and towns across the country where there have been large-scale paedophile gangs operating, child grooming gangs that have spanned over 20 years in this country. Now, what we do need to be doing, and actually, you know, I'm a Conservative politician, and I put my hands up here and say that actually previous Conservative governments also could have done more here. We have had a number of significant failings across the public sector, you know, the national blood scandal, things such as the post office scandal, and now more recently this grooming gang situation. So what we need to do as a country, when we do have national public inquiries, is make sure that whatever recommendations and learning come out of them are implemented. And sadly, that is where the country, successive governments have let us down, because the implementation of those recommendations has not been sufficient enough or, in fact, quick enough.
Why? Why do we not why do we hold these inquiries, which cost the taxpayer vast amounts of money, but not implement the findings?
I think it's because of how complicated our public sector organisations are across the country. They are vast. You've got Whitehall, which will coordinate, and the civil service that will coordinate supporting various government departments. Then you've got, for example, go back as far as Harold Shipman and the multiple, I mean, you know, years of public sector failures that could have led to his conviction much quicker. Go back as far even as Myra Hindley and Ian Brady. Now, I know that is some 40-odd years ago, but again, one police force's abject failure, Greater Manchester Police, it was a neighbouring police force and an inquisitive detective that actually led to what was going on across the boundary of those two police forces that ultimately led to the conviction of them having murdered 5 people. And actually, you could argue 3 of those could have been prevented if the original police force had acted quicker. So we've got in this country decades of situations that happen that are really, really sad and some abhorrent crimes. Sadly, with humans, these things will always happen, but it's how you fix and prevent that from happening in the future. So for me, perhaps we should be looking at a royal commission. Perhaps this needs to go wider into how we ensure, it doesn't matter what colour the government is, when a public inquiry is held, failings are found, learning points are made, how do we ensure that those responsible public sector agencies implement that quicker, particularly to prevent the harm to children as we've seen on a scale that's just unimaginable.
It's horrific, Donna. I'm reading the stories all morning now, researching for this show, and some of the testimony from these girls who are still walking into their rapists in the street of their hometown still. This is still a thing. So their lives have been ruined. And I keep coming back. The one question that I think is really important in all of this is, have thousands of children been sacrificed on the altar of political careers? And is that still the case? Is this why we are probably not going to have the full inquiry we need? Because people are worried about their political careers?
Well, I mean, look, this is not a great chapter, is it, for the current Prime Minister? He was the Director of Public Prosecutions in 2009, let's not forget, when the first big substantial investigation had concluded and there was an opportunity to prosecute and to then have prevented perhaps hundreds and hundreds more young girls from being raped, gang raped, abused, drugged, kidnapped, beaten up, and sadly, one girl, Laura Wilson, being murdered. Yeah. It wasn't until 2013 that Keir Starmer, as the then Director of Public Prosecutions, did authorise those prosecutions against the first gang of men. But it did take that delay of 4 years. That is definitely a blot on his copybook. But what we do need, and in the interest of fairness here, it's not just about Keir Starmer. There have been councils, councillors involved in this. There have been other lawyers. There have been police forces. So actually, this systemic breakdown of what appears to have been, and I'm not speaking out of turn here, this is what's come out of the reviews. It states very clearly that the failures came from a fear from the authorities of calling out the cultural situation that was going on around a certain group of men of an ethnic minority wanting to particularly target young white girls. And that is a very sad situation in our country. And that's why I think a Royal Commission is important, because we need to look and see, have we learned from those cultural problems, and are they still going on in some towns and cities across the country? My guess would be yes, they are.
Yeah, I think unfortunately you are right there. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That's Donna Jones, Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Thank you very much there, Donna. As I said, this is a story that many people... It's a horrific story. I make no excuse, though, for covering it, because it is so important. As Donna just said, it is still going on. We need to talk about it. So let's see what my panel make of this. Former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. David, I'm going to come to you first on this story. Political careers seem, to my mind at least, to be more important than thousands, and we are talking thousands, of young girls who've had their lives ruined. It's lost lives.
I wonder if it's thousands, Dawn. I wonder if it's actually not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And if you do the maths, that means the number of perpetrators will be hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million. If you think about how many times this has happened to each one, each girl who's been violated, it's horrendous. And obviously, the people who have got political careers would actually be some of the perpetrators themselves. Some of the councillors, some of the police officers, some of the people...
There was one councillor certainly accused of being part of one of the gangs, yes.
I mean, if you just think about the numbers, and the political careers there, they've got their careers, they're in positions of power. And we know that for so long, this was not just brushed under the carpet, but the people who wanted justice were actually, in some cases, accused of being racist and put in jail and had charges brought against them themselves, rather than helped, you know, to get justice and also to see that the whole industry of this grooming and raping, which is what it is stopped. And there's, you know, it's hardly been dealt with. I mean, there have been some people who have been brought before the courts now, but the sentences they get are paltry, 4, 5, 6 years.
And it has taken
and then
years.
They're out
and it has taken years, and then they're out and they're walking the same streets as their victims again. Scarlett, what do you make of this? I mean, I can't get away from the fact that people have kept quiet for two reasons. One, to protect their own political careers, and two, to protect the theory that multiculturalism in this country is working, when clearly it's not.
I think you're wrong there. I mean, I do think there was that it wasn't about protecting multiculturalism. I think there was a worry about whether you accuse a certain ethnic group of rape, when we know, frankly, it goes on all the time, right? I mean, there is no question, is that quite rightly you talk about the gangs, but, you know, we've seen the Harrods guy, we've seen Jimmy Savile, we've seen Ralph Harris. I mean, this thing about taking advantage of vulnerable young women has gone on and on and on. But actually, the problem is calling for yet another inquiry. There was an inquiry, a brilliant inquiry by Alexis Jay into child safeguarding. 20 recommendations were made. I was reading it this morning. None of them have been taken up. So actually, what we want is, rather than calling for yet another inquiry, so if you had a royal commission, it would take 2 years to set up to 10 years to come out. By that time, you know, more would. Why can't we actually do something about the recommendations that are done now? That to look at, and they sound very. They're about data gathering. They're about protecting young women. They're about particularly looking at the most vulnerable women who are in foster care, who are in residential homes, and looking at what's happening. Those are the young women. Those are the young women most in the firing line. We have to do something now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. But, I mean, it's not beyond the wit of government, of whatever particular colour the government happens to be, to get things done quickly. When they want to, they can do things quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can make a budget and then impose taxes on farmers very, very quickly if they want to do that. But it seems that successive governments, Labour, Tory, now Labour again, have not done nearly enough to stop this. And this is to do with a certain ethnic group or certain ethnic groups.
Do you agree with Scarlett on the fact that it's not to do with protecting the multicultural society that we're all meant to be so thrilled with?
That was one of the reasons why some people didn't take action, because they didn't want to, as they said, stir up racism. But I'm more concerned about the welfare of young girls being raped than worrying about political correctness and people's sensibilities about this. You need to, you know, the Labour Party goes on all the time about protecting women and children, and women and girls, protecting women and girls against violence.
This is literally just Philip's job.
But they've not done anything about this.
It's literally her job, isn't it?
Right.
So she's safeguarding minister.
Yeah, and she's not safeguarding. So there's absolute hypocrisy here when it comes to dealing with this particular issue, this particular crime by this particular ethnic group. And I do agree, Scarlett, there are people like Jimmy Savile, and that's another issue. Yeah, we need to. They need to be sorted out as well. But this is a particular issue that needs to be dealt with, and Labour hasn't done that.
And Labour has got to do it, right? They've only been in power a few months.
Well, they were in power for 13 years before under Tony Blair, and it was going on then as well.
We didn't know about it, right? It didn't start coming out until the very end of the Labour government. I mean, we're talking about 2009 when we did it. We're talking 2013 when we all began to know about it, right? And then we had a commission, and then we had a Conservative government that did nothing about the recommendations. And that's what I'm assuming assuming that Jess is actually working on these recommendations. But actually, it's not just about them. I mean, if you consider, what is it, 4% of rape cases get prosecuted? I mean, the problem is and what we all know, and the very danger, is that when you're doing rape cases, you look at the victim and you say, will the courts believe her? And that's why these very young, vulnerable women were picked on, because they're the ones that don't get believed.
Yeah, and they weren't listened to.
And they weren't listened to, and they weren't listened to by anybody.
Actually, I'm really glad you brought up the victim, Scarlett, because the wonderful Charlie Peters, who works for this channel and did that amazing documentary on this, sort of like has raised even more questions than we were aware of that needed asking. He has been talking some of the victims in this again, and some of them are in the papers today as well. And the most important question is, what do the survivors make of this call for another inquiry, a far-reaching national inquiry? And they want it. They are delighted that we are talking about this again, because they are walking into the men that attack them in the streets of their own towns.
Well, they're the ones that we need to listen to, because they're the victims.
And they want this.
Yeah, and they need to be protected, and this needs to be looked at on a national level, because it's not just one or two towns. It's everywhere. It's all over the country, including London. And
it's still going on. OK, so we had the Police and Crime Commissioner of Hampshire. Presumably it's going on there. You didn't ask her what she's doing locally. You know, she
True,
called
I should have
for a commission.
No, absolutely, I should have done. I should have done. But let me know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Do you think we need this national inquiry? Do you certainly think we need to enact on the recommendations from the previous inquiries? What do you think? The girls themselves, the women now, young women, are the ones that are still with us. They want this. So what do you think? gbnews.com. Unfortunately, we have to move on, Scott, but we will be coming back to it later on the show. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, you can go to the website gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Reform UK are rallying in Kemi Bennett's constituency this afternoon as Nigel Farage promises the gloves are off. It comes as new analysis shows the party could leapfrog both the Conservatives and Labour if it continues to pick up support. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail now, Josh, and pub landlords have to worry about more than the optics when it comes to offensive banter, it seems.
This is a really big story and important. Pub landlords could have to become banter cops to stop themselves being sued by staff offended by comments from customers under workers' rights reform. So, Labour, when they were part of their election process, they were like, we're going to reform workers' rights, and that all sounds good on paper, but there were issues in terms of how might it affect employees and fear from employees costing them more money. One of these things that they're sort of pushing through, though, is that in the Equality Act of 2010, part of the issue was that if you were offended at work or someone said something sexist or racist, something that affected you, the employer had to take some sort of, they had three chances to kind of take action.
Yeah.
Now, the employer should have taken action already. So employees can sue employers. Now, this has a big impact on us because we're comics and we perform in venues. And if some of the bar staff hear a joke that they don't like, then they can sue their employer, potentially, under this legislation.
So it's not punters?
Well, also, it could be like you're at a bar and some bloke is like, oh, I like that top, or whatever. That's not good behaviour. But the point is now that employee could sue their employer.
So, because, I mean, the sort of scenario I was imagining was that a barmaid was being maybe sexually harassed or
That's
something.
what they're focusing in this article, but other articles have gone down the free speech route.
OK.
And also venues and universities having lectures. We saw it at, in Edinburgh Fringe Festival and Sadowitz. He had a show cancelled not because of any punters, but because two of the 18-year-olds were working. They were upset by his
There was a
wedding.
bar in Brighton, wasn't there? There was a story we covered a few weeks ago. A bar in Brighton threw some people out because...
Exactly. They had turfs on the...
turfs.
Yeah. GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you very much for your company this afternoon. We have a packed show for you, so you don't want to move a muscle. Now, Reform UK is just 6 points away from becoming the biggest party in Parliament. That's according to an election predictor. The analysis from Electoral Calculus says that Nigel Farage's party could leapfrog both the Conservatives and Labour. It comes as the party rallies in Kemi Badenoch's constituency, with Farage promising supporters the gloves are off. OK, this is the ongoing... It started on Boxing Day, didn't it? With Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage having a ding-dong on social media about the ticker, about how many people were joining Reform. And Kemi picked probably the one person you should never pick a fight with, because no matter what you think of him, he is very, very good at, well, picking fights and winning them, to be honest with you. So what do you make of this one, Scarlett? I mean, the fact now that the gloves are off... Nigel Farage and Reform are targeting Kemi Badenoch's North West Essex constituency.
Which is fun. I mean, he's having fun, right? But if we look at the serious thing, why Kemi Badenoch took him on is beyond me. Because actually, what we all know, unfortunately, is, I mean... You know, the Labour Party had 500,000 members. I mean, more than the rest of the political parties in Britain put together. And they lost the 2019 election by 80 seats to the Conservatives. Yes, Reform is building momentum at the moment. Yes, they're getting lots and lots of members. It doesn't actually mean anything about what happens in a general election in sort of 4 to 5 years' time. So it's... But no, I mean, I would say to Nigel, yeah, you know, it'll be very interesting, you running a mass party and seeing how everything goes, because, as Nigel makes no secret of, he's not really... He believes in democracy, but not internal democracy. He likes running things. The more people in his party, the more problems there is. But, I mean, at the moment, he's just having a lot of fun, and at Kemi Badenoch's expense, frankly.
Yeah, I was surprised she walked into that trap.
Oh,
I mean,
what
it's like
an idiot.
You do wonder. I mean, like, you know, I actually thought Kemi Badenoch, you know, I respect Kemi Badenoch for what she's achieved, but, however, that was a challenge. I mean, the rule of Boxing Day is put your phone down, especially if you're having an eggnog. I'm not implying Kemi was. But the challenge posed by Reform cannot be overstated now, can it, David? Farage's party is now the main challenger to Labour in 89 of their seats.
Yeah, I've been watching all of this, and obviously I'm in a different position because I lead the Heritage Party, which is another challenger party. But you've got these two parties here who are trying to claim the throne of being the real opposition at the moment and saying that we're going to be able to win and be the next real opposition in the election. And you've got this Electoral Calculus survey today that says, oh, in 6 months' time, they'll be at a certain level where they can be the majority party, or, you know, if they win an election. But this is all very hypothetical, and everything that's going on here between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage is very, very entertaining, but there's not any substance in it. Kemi Badenoch also has obviously made a massive mistake, you know, claiming that this ticker was, you know, automated
and
when
it has
clearly
been independently verified as being accurate.
I mean, it would be very interesting to see if all of the people that have joined Reform live in this country, are on the electoral register in this country as well. That would be an interesting question to ask. I don't know. I've got no way of looking at that. But, you know, I mean, there's nothing in there about policy or what we need to do to restore the nation and to put the nation right again. This is all just a lot of PR. I agree with you, Scarlett. Farage is having some fun. He's enjoying this. He's doing some rallies. But, you know, what I would like to present is solutions to the problems this country has and real principles and policies that are going to set our nation right again. And I don't see anything coming out of this argument between these two two figures who have got lots of PR behind them.
The thing is, we have seen, you might not know the name, but Marco Longa, he lost a Conservative MP who lost his Dudley North seat in July. He's now jumped from the Conservatives over to Reform, saying the Conservative Party I once identified as transformed into something unrecognisable. So, I mean, we have now 3 and potentially 4, another one coming up, so we're hearing on the grapevine, can't say any names at the moment. Quite experienced Conservative MPs joining Reform.
I am old enough to remember the Social Democrat Party that really hurt Labour in the 80s. And sitting and watching it, you saw all these sort of wonderful Labour figures. It was run by 4 very serious Labour people. I mean, former Foreign Secretary David Owen.
Yes, of course.
You know, former
old enough to remember as well.
Right. Okay. As with Farage, the media loved them, absolutely loved them, and Labour was sort of in the doldrums, just like the Conservatives are at the moment. And what happened? Nothing. And that's what is the thing is that I think that, I mean, I completely agree with David, but I do think that Nigel and Reform are peaking too early because they've got to do an awful lot of work about policy. And reading their manifesto for the last election, it was a wish list rather than anything. It was, this is what people would like, and we're going to deliver the end of waiting lists in the NHS, lower taxes, no debt. I mean, it was crazy, right? And actually, the problem is that they have to sustain serious policies, and I just don't think it's going to work.
Well, we see some of that from the main parties at the moment. Just want to ask you this. Gillian's just got in touch. Good afternoon, Gillian. Says, Dawn, please ask David how his party's policies differ from Reform, because you are a good man, David. This is Gillian speaking. But it is pointless having 2 or 3 challenger parties. They should unite for the common good. What would you say to Gillian?
I get asked that question a lot. And, you know, Reform didn't have a fully fleshed-out manifesto until a couple of weeks into the election campaign in June 2024. With the Heritage Party has had a full manifesto full of principles and policies since the beginning. And I think Reform actually took a lot of what was in our manifesto and just rewrote it and rejigged the sentences and said there are policies. So there are a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. I mean, we are a specifically socially conservative party. I mean, if you had the assisted dying bill, for example, and the majority of Reform MPs voted for euthanasia, where it's our policy not to have euthanasia. It's very, very clear on these social issues. There are other differences as well over the last 4 years.
So you can't see your party merging and strengthening the right to take on Labour?
You know, I'm open to talking. I mean, I haven't had any discussions already, but I can always talk with people. I'm not going to say that there's anything going to come out of that. But at the moment, we are developing, we're growing, we're standing more candidates, finding more candidates. And over the last 4 years, I think we've been in opposition to Reform on lockdowns, on injections, on Ukraine, and many, many other issues that people see.
But interesting. You're not ruling it out, though, are you? Right, OK, thank you very much. We're leaving that one for now. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's show. It is packed. The UK prepares for plummeting temperatures with snow set to batter parts of the country. Well, it's January. It's after the NHS advised the public not to go outside early in the morning or late at night due to adverse weather. I mean, is it really time we got a grip on this? I was going to say a rude word there. That and so much more to come is after the news with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Your headlines at 12:34. King Charles is deeply saddened by the death of a British man who was killed when an alleged Islamic State supporter drove a truck into crowds celebrating the New Year in New Orleans. 31-year-old Edward Pettifer is believed to be the stepson of Prince William and Prince Harry's nanny when they were younger, known as Tiggy. The King has been in touch with Mr Pettifer's family to share his personal condolences. Meanwhile, the FBI believe the man who drove the truck is believed to have acted alone. Shamsuddin Jabbar's rented truck rammed into crowds in New Orleans, killing 14 and injuring dozens. This comes as the FBI says there's no definitive link between that attack and the cyber truck explosion in Las Vegas, after the driver was confirmed as active-duty American soldier Matthew Livelsberger. GB News can exclusively reveal that the first boatload of 50 illegal migrants this year has crossed the English Channel. The Border Force vessel picked up 50 migrants from their small boat early this morning and is currently on its way back to Dover. It comes after nearly 37,000 people made the treacherous journey in small boats last year. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has distanced himself from Elon Musk's support for Tommy Robinson. Nigel Farage has said Robinson is not what we need after Elon Musk praised the imprisoned right-wing activist. Mr Musk, the tech billionaire and supporter of Mr Farage, retweeted posts on X describing Robinson as a political prisoner and separately said Britain needs reform now. And the government's emergency planning team is holding a meeting as Ireland braces for a multi-hazard weather event which is due to hit the country later today. The UK is braced for heavy snow and icy rain this weekend, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption. 2 amber and 2 yellow alerts have been issued by the Met Office across most of the country, with up to 30 centimetres of snow expected. Forecasters say power cuts are likely and that vehicles could become stranded on roads as wintry conditions continue. Trains and flights could also be delayed or cancelled. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. From the Met Office, we have already issued amber warnings across many parts of the UK. Snow and ice, a real feature of the forecast through this weekend. There'll be some troublesome travelling conditions. An area of low pressure coming in from the southwest, bumping into cold air across the country. An icy start this morning. So a bright start across central northern parts for a few wintry showers around northern Scotland, seeing some sleet and snow. But it's as this band of rain pushes into the southwest, we could see some temporary snow over the moors, and then slowly through the day this pushes northwards, leading to an increasing risk of snow and ice. Temperatures for the afternoon really struggling despite any hazy sunshine, only a few degrees above freezing, so icy stretches still possible. But it is into this evening time as this band of rain starts to push northwards, bumps into the colder air. We see it turn to snow, even to lower levels across parts of Wales. Further north, it is a drier end to the evening, but it won't be long before the rain, sleet and snow pushes in. Temperatures falling below freezing across Scotland under the clearest skies. Sleet and snow still across Orkney and Shetland as well. Met Office warnings out through the day. Amber warnings coming in force for this evening as this band of rain, sleet and snow pushes northwards. 3 to 10 centimetres possible to lower levels, perhaps even locally 15 to 30. And then over the higher ground, 30 to 40 centimetres over northern parts of England. Turning back to rain the further south you are as milder air starts to move in, but temperatures falling below freezing, especially under the clear skies across Scotland, with some icy stretches developing, also icy stretches for Northern Ireland. So a hazardous start to a Sunday morning across the country. Outbreaks of rain, snow as well, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. It is worth checking before leaving the house. Drier in the south, windy, temperatures well above average here, 13-14 Celsius.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you very much for your company this afternoon. I really appreciate your time. And remember, this show's about you, so get in touch. Huge show, loads to stuff, and really important stuff as well. gbnews.com/your say. Now, we are British, so we are naturally going to talk about the weather. Heavy snow is expected to hit parts of England and Wales this weekend. It's called January, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption in some areas. The more severe warnings cover northern England, the Midlands and much of Wales, and are in place from this evening throughout Sunday, with 30 centimetres of snow expected in some areas. Temperatures fell as low as -8 degrees early yesterday, and the bitter conditions created by an Arctic wind are expected to continue into next week. As I keep saying, it's January. Joining me now is meteorologist at the Met Office, Claire Nazir. Claire, lovely to see you. Thank you very much for joining me. Claire, it's January.
It's January, yes, it is. And, you know, it's a multi-hazard event. Lots of people trying to travel north, south, east and west this weekend. I don't know if you remember the 1st of January, but I do, and I was travelling to Sheffield, and it was horrible. Yeah, I was asking. But it was one of those days where there was so much. I live near Manchester, and there was so much flooding there. It was very, very scary. And then I drove back from Sheffield on the next day, and it was icy, it was slippery. So why these warnings are in place? It's to keep people safe and to alert people that there's a lot of bad weather around, and you could run into problems. Many people will.
And how long is this cold snap expected to last? I was looking at the temperature this morning, and it seemed to be a couple of days, and it goes up quite high again.
Well, in the south, it does turn mild just for a time. And this is where the problem is, Dawn. We've got some very cold Arctic air across much of the north of the country. The rain is running in from the southwest. It's hitting that cold air and turning to snow. You said up to 30 centimetres of snow. Add on the strength of the wind and blizzards. It's pretty horrible tonight and into tomorrow across much of Wales and Midlands. But you could see some snow in London later this evening before it turns back to rain. And then the cold air gradually wins. And so it's going to turn even colder with the risk of ice and further snow showers through the next few days. Sub-zero temperatures. You know, it is winter, but we're not really used to it. We're more used to cloud, rain and wind, to be honest.
Well, yeah, well, it's been particularly cloud, windy, rainy, pretty grey December, wasn't it? Claire, I have to say, though, with the warnings, like, I mean, I think you do an amazing job, but with the warnings, like, don't go out at night or in the morning, and I think we had Wed Streeting saying, wear an extra layer of clothing. It is a bit mollycoddling sometimes, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, well, you've got your right to your own opinion, but I think you're talking about the cold health alert warnings, which actually are for social services, for emergency responders, and it's for those who may be a bit wobbly on their feet or are very vulnerable, can't moderate their own temperature, and also for care homes where you're going to have to keep that temperature high to keep people safe. So it's not really for us, because we're sprightly and we feel healthy, but it's, well, okay. But yes, you know what I mean? It's for those who are vulnerable and those who are really old. And so it's keep an eye on your neighbours and your family. Yes. Make sure they're warm enough. And it is slippery outside. I've got a 95-year-old next to me, and her garden was flooded yesterday, and now it's ice. She shouldn't be outside. So it's for people like that. So, you know, there's so many different swathes of populations across the country. Most of us will be okay. But to be honest, my advice is over the next 24 hours, if you're under that amber warning for snow and ice, do not travel.
OK, brilliant. That's wonderful. Claire Nazir at the Met Office. Thank you very much, Claire. Actually, that's very good advice. I would just sit on your sofa in front of the telly and watch GB News. It's much warmer, much nicer. A nice cup of tea, maybe some biscuits, or those leftover mince pies. Now, let's see what my panel make of this. Former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and leader of the Heritage Party David Kirsten are now going to talk about the weather.
Well, that's what we do in this country, isn't it? There's lots of weather. There's January weather in January. Isn't that amazing?
You know, the average person in this country talks about the weather 3 times a day, every day.
That's amazing, isn't it?
But
that's how we should do it.
Because it changes all the time. I mean, you say January weather, but actually, last January, it wasn't freezing. It was just cold and wet. And I think there is, I mean, I think Claire's absolutely right. There is a real problem about early in the morning, late at night, ice. And if you're an older person, like us, and you have a fall, actually, that is really, really serious. But the other thing is it for any of us, it makes us think, what sort of shoes should we be wearing, right? Actually, you don't go out in your high heels in the morning and at night. If you're going to walk, that you need to think that there is ice. I mean, actually, we just have to take the weather.
David, did you go out in your high heels this morning?
You don't know what I'm wearing, do you, there?
I can see. They're very nice.
Yeah. They kept me safe anyway. I was listening to all the safety warnings coming from the government. We don't need all these safety warnings, do we? We just need a bit of common sense, don't we? You go out, you see it's icy, and you don't walk too fast.
I do find most older people have that common sense. Hi, Mum, if you're watching. OK, thank you very much to my wonderful panel, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and leader head of party David Curtin. Now, if you want to escape all the January weather and in search of some winter sun, here is a forecast of some of those top European holiday destinations for you.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking across southern parts of Europe for some winter sun on Sunday, and whilst in the west it's going to be quite wet but also relatively warm. A different story further east. Temperatures here around or a touch below average for the time of year, and a mixture of sunny breaks with a few outbreaks of rain. The wettest weather will be pushing across parts of Portugal and into western Spain, but here, like I said, temperatures above average for the time of year. Madeira, for example, getting into the low 20s Celsius. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Ooh, winter sunshine, warm, that sounds good, doesn't it? OK, I'm Dawn Newsom, this is GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's show, so don't you dare move a muscle. It's time to go through the biggest sports stories with broadcaster Ada McGee, and we're, of course, talking about history made by 17-year-old dart sensation Luke Littler. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. You can put the kettle on, but we'll see you very soon.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Bansky's Girl with Balloon is arguably one of the artist's most recognisable images. So when a limited edition print signed by the artist was stolen from Grove Gallery in London, an investigation was launched by the Metropolitan Police's flying squad. The work was thankfully retrieved. The desire to own great works of art has once again become evident this week, albeit a little further afield on the continent. Police in Italy have uncovered a criminal network forging artworks by Bansky, Andy Warhol, Pablo Picasso and others. Investigators said that they've seized more than 2,100 fake pieces of art with a potential market value of about £165 million. With me to discuss that case is the Chief Executive of Grove Gallery, James Ryan.
The art world needs to tighten up. It is known as a bit of a Wild West out there because people will try and chance it with these forgeries. You're quite right, there's only one actual original, but even auction houses have been hoodwinked before.
The burglary that you suffered is sub judice, so we have to be careful what we say about it. But it must have been a bit of a shock to you. I mean, was it a broken window, a smashed door?
At 10, 11 o'clock at night, and just hammer straight through, shoulder barging through the door, and then in and out. You know, gone in 60 seconds. I must say, I know.
Obviously, that targeted attack. The person would have known what he or she was after. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I must say, I know they cop a lot of flack, the police force, but the flying squad got the artwork back within 3 days. They were fantastic. So yeah, I've never heard or seen, other than the Thomas Crown affair type film. I just didn't think it'd be happening to little old me, in Fitzrovia, but it did, and thankfully we got it back.
GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. You've got a nice cup of tea in front of you, keeping yourself warm out there. It's time to go through all the latest sports news, and broadcaster Aidan McGee is here with us, and I wonder what you're going to be talking about, Aidan.
I don't know. What do you think? No, listen, it was absolutely fantastic last night for those who stayed up. It wasn't on that late, actually, but it was just because it was a final, it was a showpiece thing. There were lots of paraphernalia beforehand. Chris Hoy actually gave away hand over the trophy at the end of it, which I thought was a really nice, nice touch. Yeah, but look, he got the job done. Luke Littler, this is in the first half of the match. He watched... Yesterday afternoon, he watched a replay of last year's final against Luke Humphries. He knew that he made mistakes last year. The key thing was that he didn't make a fast start. That wasn't the case last night. He got in front. Michael van Gerwen, don't forget, 3-time world champion.
I was going to say, it's not too shabby opposition,
not at all.
Is it?
He held the record, previous record. It was broken last night. His youngest ever winner, which was set back in 2014. So, yes, he rallied. Michael van Gerwen did. His average was over 100 compared to 102 for Luke Littler. So his level was very high as well. But once Littler got in front, he was not going to relinquish that lead. And where now for him? Well, you know, he's already won Grand Slam events. He's won the Premier League. He's taken his earnings now to about £1.5 million.
How much did he get for last night?
£500,000. Now, my understanding is that Sky have renewed their TV rights deal. They didn't do what they did with boxing, which was get complacent and let it just drift. They've acted quickly this time. They've got the darts under their belt. I'm led to believe that next year's winner will win £1 million.
Wow.
So that will be about half of what the winner of Wimbledon gets, and about a third of what the Golf Open champion earns. So it's getting up towards that level. I think that the days at the Ali Pali are probably numbered, as I've said to you before.
Because the people that want to go, the amount of people that want to go.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was on an upward curve anyway.
Yeah.
But Luke Littler has just taken it a different direction. A little bit like golf in the late 90s. We always knew it was a big sport, but then Tiger Woods comes along and has the impact that probably Emma Raducanu might have had in tennis a couple of years ago.
Exactly.
There's a real absence of stars on the women's section of the draw and the women's circuit, and she should really have done that, and she hasn't done so. But let's stick positive for now. And if we look at Luke Littler, 83% rise year-on-year on tickets last year, and they were the golden ticket last night. It really was. You couldn't really get anywhere.
What makes him so good?
I think it's his...
darts is... unlike a lot of sports, Aidan, darts is a sport that most of us can do.
Yes. Well, I tried the other night.
No. But, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I can't sort of, like, you know, I don't know, high jump or whatever.
Yeah.
But I can throw an arrow at a dartboard.
Yes.
Badly,
It's about eyesight. It's about seeing gaps that other people cannot see. So, yes, you might hit a triple 20. That might be great. But then have you left enough space to get it the second time around?
Right.
So to hit the same spot again and again, whether it be the bullseye or anywhere on the wall, don't fit on the boulder, rather. Don't forget that a millimetre wide of the mark and you could get 0. So they're the fine margins you're talking about. Also, it's the coolness under pressure. That was the biggest game of his...
For a teenager?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not... He's 17, but it's not even his first final. Don't forget he got to it last year. He's achieved a great level of consistency throughout the year. And elite sport is about performing under pressure when it really matters. And he delivered last night, big style.
Amazing.
Yes.
And he has got great things ahead of him, obviously.
Without doubt. As I say, it's not just him, it's where he takes darts, because I think he can go anywhere. He's going to crack America.
That's the one thing I heard, that lots of youngsters now taking up darts as well.
Yeah, because they've got this thing called the JDC, and that's produced its first major player now with Luke Littler. That means they're not relying on pubs to produce players, so they're getting players much younger, and they're producing something really special.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Aidan McGee. Loads more coming up. This is GB News, and we'll be back very soon. But first, it is time for the all-important weather with Greg. Here's all the details. Stay warm.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there. It's a cold weekend to come for most, with outbreaks of rain, snow and ice. Amber warnings for snow and ice across parts of England and Wales through this weekend. So there could be some tricky travelling conditions worth checking before leaving the house through this weekend. Low pressure moving in from the southwest, bumping into colder air, leading to that risk of snow and ice, and already rain across the southwest where temperatures are rising, but snow across Wales, the Midlands, down into London, northwards through the evening time, pushing into northern England, eastern England as we head into the early hours. Outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. By the end of the night, temperatures under clear skies well below freezing, -7, -8 Celsius. Icy stretches, but mild across the south. Outbreaks of heavy rain developing here, but it is really the focus of the snow. We do have rain, sleet and snow across northern Scotland. Icy stretches first thing Sunday morning across the country as temperatures are widely below freezing. Icy stretches Northern Ireland, but it's really parts of northern England, North Wales where the snow will be heavy and treacherous, perhaps up to 40 centimetres over the higher ground in places. Rain further south, but leading to the risk of some flooding as the snow melts here. Quite breezy too as the rain continues through the day, but it is really the focus of the snow, particularly across northern England and southern Scotland as we go through the day and afternoon on Sunday. Some brighter skies trying to push into the far northwest, but temperatures really struggling here, not much above freezing, but very mild across the south and southeast here, temperatures 13 or 14 Celsius with that southerly breeze. The risk of flooding into the evening time as further rain is expected across some southern and western parts. The snow continuing parts of Scotland right through into Monday as well. And it stays cold next week for many, temperatures below average with the further risk of snow at times. See you soon.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang. From treats to holidays to fun times with the family, a totally tax-free £50,000 in cash could make you feel alive in 2025. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
The latest Channel 4 Dispatches documentary has revealed details about the royal family's finances, including reports that private royal estates have received millions of pounds of income from public bodies and charities.
Morning, and good morning, Stephen. Absolutely, I'm not shocked either. And also, as a former butler, I was also a duchy rentee. I used to rent one of the properties, and we were always aware of the property portfolio. I don't think it's kind of a bit news thing. Obviously, part of the, if you like, the business side is these two duchies, Cornwall and Lancaster, and the late Queen obviously was the Duke as well of Lancaster, and now you've got the Prince was obviously, or the King, when he was Prince, had the duchy. And these properties, portfolios as well, I mean, obviously they make money. I mean, but they've been around for, I think they go back to George III, if not before.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 4th of January, and this is the weekend on GB News. Now, Reform UK are rallying in Kemi Badenoch's constituency this afternoon as Nigel Farage promises the gloves are off. The gathering comes as an election predictor says Reform are just 6 points off becoming the biggest party in Parliament. A shocking report in The Telegraph says that asylum seekers are receiving preferential treatment within the NHS, despite an ever-increasing wait time for Brits. I'll be taking a deeper dive into that story this hour. And yeah, it's January. Blizzards to batter Britain as fresh weather warnings are issued by the Met Office. It comes as the public are warned not to go outside in the early morning or late at night. Do we all really need to get a bit more of a grip, though, on this? I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate your company, and there's a lot to be doing at this time of year, and not least taking those Christmas decorations down. But it is cold outside. It can be dangerous depending on where you live with the ice and everything, so may as well stay there and join me in the warm and dry watching a brilliant show, because it's absolutely packed, really packed, with some really important topics. And this show is nothing without you and your views, and lots of you have been getting in touch, and I will read as many out as I possibly can. Very, very simple to get involved in this show. Just go to gbnews.com/yoursay and join in our conversation. Keeping me company this hour is broadcaster Matthew Torbett and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. But before we get straight into today's stories, let's get the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. These are your headlines. King Charles is deeply saddened by the death of a British man who was killed when an alleged Islamic State supporter drove a truck into crowds celebrating the New Year in New Orleans. 31-year-old Edward Pettifer is believed to be the stepson of Prince William and Prince Harry's nanny when they were younger, known as Tiggy. The King has been in touch with Mr Pettifer's family to share his personal condolences. Meanwhile, the FBI believe the man who drove the truck is believed to have acted alone. Shamsuddin Jabbar's rented truck rammed into crowds in New Orleans, killing 14 and injuring dozens. This comes as the FBI says there is no definitive link between that attack and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas, after the driver was confirmed as active-duty American soldier Matthew Livelsberger. GB News can exclusively reveal that the first boatload of 50 illegal migrants this year has crossed the English Channel. The Border Force vessel picked up 50 migrants from their small boat early this morning and drove them back to Dover. It comes after nearly 37,000 people made the treacherous journey in small boats last year. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has said the gloves are off and vows to ramp up his campaigning efforts in Kemi Badenoch's constituency of North West Essex. It follows claims from the Conservative leader that Reform's online membership tracker was fake, despite several news outlets reporting they have seen the party's membership data and believe the tracker is accurate. Speaking ahead of his racecourse rally in Kemi Badenoch's constituency, Nigel Farage said the Tory leader had her chance. Meanwhile, the Reform UK leader has distanced himself from Elon Musk's support for Tommy Robinson. Nigel Farage has said Robinson is not what we need after Elon Musk praised the imprisoned right-wing activist. Mr Musk, the tech billionaire and supporter of Mr Farage, retweeted posts on X describing Robinson as a political prisoner and separately said Britain needs reform now. Sir Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs, according to the whistleblower Maggie Oliver, who helped expose the scandal. It comes as pressure mounts on the government to deliver a public inquiry into the gangs that systematically groomed and raped young girls. Tech billionaire Elon Musk has called on the King to step in and dissolve Parliament after Labour rejected a call for a national inquiry. Mr Musk has been widely outspoken on the issue after claiming the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, deserves to be in prison. Meanwhile, former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley told GB News people have allowed these crimes to happen.
The scale of the raping of children by these gangs is so wide and has gone on for so long and was allowed to happen because of various agencies not doing their job properly. It is such a serious matter. So many lives have been destroyed. We must do everything possible to ensure it never happens again. And I therefore think that a wide-reaching public inquiry with all the statutory powers so that it could compel people to give evidence is the very least that the victims deserve.
Now, the UK is braced for heavy snow and icy rain this weekend, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption. 2 amber and 2 yellow alerts have been issued across most of the country, with up to 30 centimetres of snow expected. Forecasters say power cuts are likely and that vehicles could become stranded on roads as wintry conditions continue. Trains and flights could also be delayed or cancelled. A judge has ordered Donald Trump to be sentenced next week in his New York hush money case, but he suggested the US president-elect will not be jailed. It's a surprise move. The sentencing has been set for the 10th of January, just 10 days before the presidential inauguration. Trump's spokesperson called the case lawless and a witch hunt in a statement released after the date was announced. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Now, before we get straight into today's stories, earlier on, you just heard Sophia talking about it in the news then. Earlier on, we were talking about the grooming gangs, and we had Scarlett Maguire on. And you've been getting in touch about what Scarlett had said. I just want to read one message out rather quickly for you. This is from Humpty Tilsley. And Scarlett mentioned Jimmy Savile and Al Fayed. And Humpty says, Savile, Iafeld and Harris were disgusting individuals. However, it was their celebrity status and power that gave them an in with young girls and women. Likewise, those in the church abuse their position with vulnerable children. I excuse none of them. However, grooming gangs are not individuals in a position of power. They are lowlives that have exploited the vulnerable with drugs and alcohol, threatened them and carried out horrendous acts of violence. Some have found a joyous pleasure in operating the way they have. I could weep for the young girls caught up in their sick fantasies. Humpty, you speak for many, many people, so do keep your thoughts coming in on all the subjects we're talking about today. gbnews.com/your say. Right, OK, now we are moving on to, well, GB News can exclusively reveal that the first boatload of illegal migrants this year has crossed the English Channel. A Border Force vessel picked up the migrants from their small boat this morning and made its way back to Dover. It comes after nearly 37,000 people made the treacherous journey in small boats last year. Joining me now is political commentator and migration expert Dr. Mike Jones. Mike, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. So we had to happen. It was just a matter of the weather calming down, but we have now seen the first boatload escorted in to the UK by Border Force. What do you make of where we're heading for 2025 with this situation?
Well, look at the numbers already. They're staggering. Since 2018, more than 150,000 illegals have crossed the English Channel. That's a huge number. You know, it's equivalent to a town the size of Blackpool or a city the size of Cambridge. And last year, the numbers arriving in Dover were just shy of 37,000, a 25% increase on the previous year. Around 23,000 have arrived since Labour came into power. Now, as to your question, I don't see any massive dips in the total numbers arriving this year. I think the best case scenario for Labour is that if they continue to deport a critical mass of people to safe countries like Pakistan, Nigeria and India, you know, those are safe countries, so legally it shouldn't be too difficult and it will act as a deterrent. The problem, however, is going to involve deporting people to unsafe countries such as Iran, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. You know, to stop these inflows, you've got to amend the Human Rights Act.
OK, so which is where, obviously, a country like Rwanda would have served the purpose as a deterrent. Even Tony Blair, back in the day, said we need a deterrent. As things stand at the moment, Labour don't have a deterrent. They're smashing the gangs, but is that a deterrent to stop people getting in the boats in the first place?
No, I mean, putting all your eggs into the smash the gang strategy is very dangerous because it's extremely difficult to do. The Rwanda plan wasn't perfect. It was very expensive. there were loopholes there. The Safety of Rwanda bill allowed various appeals to take place, but it was an option. It was an off-ramp. And would it have acted as a deterrent? Yes, I think it would have. I mean, even before the plan was operational, you had illegal migrants moving to the Republic of Ireland. So definitely it would have acted as a deterrent. It was very silly of the Labour government to mothball it.
And the other question we constantly get asked here, border force, right? Border force. OK, it's not a border taxi service. Why do border force spend so much of their time escorting these boats into our waters and onto shore? Many people ask that question.
That's a great question. Two things, really. Number one, international law, SOLAS, the UN laws of the sea. You know, we're obligated to actually bring these people on shore safely. You know, if we ignore those rules, a case of involuntary manslaughter could be made against the British authorities. The second reason is that the French won't take these people back. I mean, in 2021, Boris Johnson did urge the French to have joint boat patrols with the British authorities and to take, you know, accept these people back in Calais. But the French just point blank said no. The Elysée will cooperate with Britain on policing the shores of Calais, and they will also confiscate boat parts, but they're not prepared to take these people back en masse.
Why, the other question I can't get my head around properly is why countries like Italy can set up agreements with countries where the migrants come from, in Italy's case, North Africa, and Australia have a similar policy as well. Why can't we just do that? What is wrong with that solution?
Well, I mean, we could strike out returns agreements with countries of origin, you know, such as, you know, Pakistan, India, Nigeria, possibly even some of the unsafe countries. We could actually do that, but legally at the moment it's very difficult to do. In the case of France and the European Union, they simply won't accept these people back. I mean, in theory, an agreement could be brokered, but it would be very much quid pro quo. They would require us to take illegal migrants from the European Union itself, which essentially is what happened in the Dublin Convention.
So, I mean, the latest plan we heard from Labour was to confiscate mobile phones of the people traffickers, mostly who seem to be in Turkey in any case. So, do you think that's going to have any effect on the numbers crossing the Channel?
I mean, it could disrupt some of the operations. You know, when the French confiscate a boat, that obviously stems the inflow to a certain extent. The same thing could happen with these new interim measures. But it's only going to make a difference to the margins. It's not going to smash the gangs. It's not going to stop the numbers travelling the English Channel.
Indeed. That's Dr. Mike Jones, political commentator and migration expert. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Mike, although it doesn't sound like it's going to be much of a very happy new year for those of us who want to see the horrific trade in people across the Channel coming to an end anytime soon, does it? Let's see what my panel make of this one. Broadcaster Matthew Torbet and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Henry, I'm going to come to you first on this one. As soon as the weather's calmed down in 2025, we see more young men, I've seen the pictures, on a boat crossing the Channel, escorted in by Border Force.
Dawn, I've not looked at compared the figures for the dates for each year, the specific dates, but I live down on the southeast coast and it was bitterly cold last night. And I think one would have to look at the figures, but this year we're seeing more movement in bad weather conditions, particularly the cold, than we have done in any previous year. But I agree with what Mike Jones was saying in every respect. I do think that there is an opportunity to negotiate with the French and Brussels, but I have always criticised the UK government's approach in doing that because it has been a singular thing. And everything that the British government has done, and in fact, just about every political party proposes to do, is in isolation of all of the other parts of the puzzle. The European Union faces a migration problem, but the negotiations we've had with France, let's just think about it in a moment, are couched in the context of the European Union's open borders and the European Union having a problem. So if we send them back to France, France is just going to have to sit on them. There's nothing they can do. So it needs to be a broader conversation. And if you remember the Brexit discussion, and before the referendum,
We're still having,
a lot of it. Well, we are. That's a different. Yeah, but let's not go there now. We can do if you want. But but one of the reasons, one of the justifications for leaving the European Union was to take back control of our borders. We haven't done that yet. But leaving the European Union did enable us to do it to a greater extent than we could before. It's the same with France, but France is still in the European Union. They do not have full control over their borders. So negotiating with the French on this issue is never going to succeed as long as you're not having the conversation with Brussels at the same time. Whitehall and London the last government and this government do not want to have that conversation with Brussels, because then they're afraid that Brussels will say, OK, well, we want this from you and we want that from you, and which is the Brussels way. But I do believe that there is scope to work with them. I've worked with the French on international borders. I've worked with I had the portfolio for civilian border management in Brussels, and I do believe there are openings, but nobody wants to listen. Fine. The other thing, just very briefly, I would say, is that I am getting increasingly frustrated, and we might, I don't know, come on to this later, but at political parties who make very appealing proposals, put the Navy out there, put the Royal Marines out of there, without thinking through any of the resource implications, any of the planning implications, any of the detail, or any of the second and third order effects that will have, which need to be managed. Of course, a future government could order the Navy into the Channel, and I absolutely would agree that the Royal Navy could stop the boats, but in such a way that there are huge consequences that then have to be managed, which haven't been touched on at all in this conversation. So I'm worried about the way that the national conversation is going at the moment.
Matthew, quickly, because I think we're about to go to the Reform Conference. Matthew, quickly, do you want to...
Yeah, I think
comment on this.
Henry speaks about the cold last night. It was bitterly cold, and I think if we've got people coming during those conditions, it probably speaks to the desperation certain people are feeling. I think this could have been solved partly in 2021. The French Interior Minister said to Boris Johnson, you need a legal route for people to come across, because at the moment, to claim asylum in this country, you have to be physically in the UK, which is why people are crossing. Now, if we set up sort of processing centres in France, which is what French officials said they would be open to and would pay because it didn't serve anybody.
Sorry, Matthew, I think we have to... Right. Sorry, we will come back to you, but I think we now are going to Chelmsford Live, where Zahir Yousaf, the chairman of Reform, is actually addressing the party live.
And, of course, Keir Starmer, as we all know, is the son of a toolmaker. Well, she's clearly not a very good one, because she claimed that our counter was fake. And that she knew this because she was, and I quote, monitoring the back end. Well, I'm afraid, as has now been widely reported by reputable journalists, the only back end Kemi had been monitoring is the one that she was talking out of. But, you know, we all know that we should be very grateful to Kemi. We should be very grateful to the leader of the Tory party, because in the preceding 24 hours of her ill-advised outburst, Reform UK signed up more members than in any 24-hour period in our entire history. So can we please give a big Reform round of applause to Kemi Badenoch? Her service is greatly appreciated. But look, on a serious note, we are gathered here, at least in part because we know in our hearts that the country we love is in trouble. We live in a country in which somehow, despite spending £54 billion a year of your money on defence, the number of military-aged males that have entered the UK illegally via small boats now exceeds the total available soldiers in the British Army. Most are from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. The Tories, and now Labour, have voluntarily inflicted a national security emergency on this country. But change is coming. I want you to take a moment to picture the day when in just a few years' time, Prime Minister Nigel Farage triumphantly arrives at number 10 Downing Street, having put his briefcase down on the desk and taken a seat. He will pick up the phone to the First Sea Lord and he will issue an order. He will order His Majesty's Royal Navy to see to it that not a single unauthorized vessel crossing the English Channel makes it to the shores of the United Kingdom. Now, I'm well aware that the protocol is to go via the Minister of Defence, but I think Nigel should make that call himself, don't you? Yes. Our Royal Navy will embark on a humanitarian mission to pick up those attempting this dangerous journey, ensuring nobody is harmed and that they are taken back to France for their own safety. We will leave the ECHR and replace it with a British Bill of Rights. We will pass legislation making it compulsory that anybody who comes here illegally not only will never be given the right to remain, but they will be deported back to the country from which they came. Listen, we believe in fair play. If your first act upon coming to this great country is to break British laws, instead of being given free accommodation and phones, you will be removed promptly and efficiently. And let me tell you this, no unaccountable foreign court will stop us, because we will finally have a Prime Minister who will ensure that the interests of the British people come first. And a reform government will also do something that Labour refused to do, and that the Tories failed to do in their 14 years in government. We will ensure a full national independent inquiry into the despicable crimes of the grooming gangs that have terrorized young girls in this country for decades. This inquiry will leave no stone unturned to ensure justice for the victims and their families. It will ensure that the perpetrators, the monstrous perpetrators, and the officials who enable them by turning a blind eye are brought to justice and are made to pay the heaviest price for their crimes. We will do the things necessary to heal this country because we're the only ones who can. Now, I've made a few jokes at their expense today, but, you know, it's no surprise that the likes of the Tories, Labour, and the left-wing media look at reform's progress and arrive at the conclusion that it's all fake, because all their prior experience means that the level of cognitive dissonance absolutely fries their brains. All they have ever known over decades is incompetence, division, defeatism, cynicism, self-serving corruption, and resignation to the United Kingdom's managed decline. So when they're confronted with a reform party that is highly competent, patriotic, fast-moving, and growing at explosive rates, they quite literally cannot believe their eyes. Well, I have a message for them. If you think reform's membership growth is explosive, wait until you see what a reform government will do to the British economy and real wages for British people. It is going to be something to behold. Now, one message I think it's important that we do not forget is that one of the most powerful drivers behind reform's momentum is just how united we all are behind Nigel. You know, the Tories, they have had 5 leaders in 6 years. Again, just think about that. 5 leaders in 6 years. It's no surprise that they are so weak and transient as leaders. They have to spend, frankly, the vast majority of their time and cognitive capacity watching their own backs. But here at Reform, Nigel and the rest of our brilliant MPs and our team can focus all of our energy, all of our cognitive capacity on building a movement to make the United Kingdom a poised, prosperous and powerful country once again. Because British people should be amongst the most prosperous people in the world. Instead, we languish 26th in the world in terms of real GDP per person. Even though we have so much going for us. 3 of the top 20 universities in the world are here. A large number of the world's finest engineers are here. And if you are in any doubt about that, just go and look at the offices of DeepMind, or go and look around the Dyson Institute, or go and tour the Rolls-Royce aerospace engine factory, where they build not only incredible aerospace engines, but also nuclear modular reactors. We have a leading position in the world in financial services, and we have the best possible time zone. As someone who built a successful business here, I will tell you that the British people are full of talent, energy, and dynamism. The brightest and best still, despite successive governments' best efforts, continue to fall over themselves to want to come here. But for them, we make it impossible. Remarkably, it is quite literally easier for a convicted murderer to make it to the United Kingdom than it is for a Nobel laureate. So why is it that the British people get poorer every year in real terms? It's down to the appallingly incompetent and Britain-hating political leadership that this country has endured for decades. There's the religious cult of net zero, an appalling theft of hard-working British people's money and their jobs, all to fund the growth of China and the egos of champagne socialists. Speaking of which, I have a quick question for Ed Miliband, and for that matter, Boris Johnson. If renewables are so cheap, why have British people been forced to subsidise renewables to the tune of £90 billion over the last decade? That's £300 per household per year extra that they've had to pay in their energy bills out of their post-tax pay, while they struggle to make ends meet. All to do what? Enrich renewable corporate shareholders? And, by the way, given all they did was offshore their emissions and manufacturing to China and India, they've done nothing to make the world cleaner. Make no mistake, this is one of the greatest heists on the British people of all time, and Reform will bring this to an end. Then there's a bureaucratic state, which has ballooned to a ridiculous size. 500,000 people are now employed by the civil service, many of whom get to work from home, all being paid on your dime. In the last 7 years, their burden on the taxpayer has rocketed by 50% to £15 billion. Well, I have some news for them too, that in the age of AI, with competent leadership, there's no reason that couldn't be cut at least in half and still deliver a vastly superior service to the British people. But the problem of the bureaucratic state is much more pernicious than that. They act as a suffocating parasite, feasting on the dynamism and hard work of the British people. We have far too many regulations, far too many regulators, and nowhere near enough builders. That's why we will demolish the unelected, unaccountable quangos and unleash the tidal wave of potential in the British people. Now, the reality is the two old parties have spent decades creating these problems. Labour, Conservative, it's made no difference. And that's why reform is necessary. That is why reform has broken through at such a breathless pace. Because in reform, British people see a real alternative. They see history being made in real time. The stranglehold that the two old parties have had on the politics of this country is finally being broken. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are responsible for that. And generations to come will owe you a debt of gratitude. You know, Nigel gave his New Year's address from Blenheim Palace, famous, of course, for being the birthplace of Sir Winston Churchill. Now, this is a man whose legacy has come under assault in recent years. People calling themselves teachers have sought to rewrite history and disparage his legacy in one of the greatest people ever, one of the greatest Britons ever to have lived. But their efforts are in vain, for his spirit lives on. It lives on in the people in this room. It lives on in those watching at home, and the millions of Reform supporters across the country who know in their hearts that the time has come for them to stand up and be counted in their country's hour of need. Because we see a future in which the United Kingdom, instead of being ritually humiliated, celebrates triumph after triumph. One in which national pride once again radiates through the kingdom, because our people achieve astonishing feats in architecture, in engineering, in literature, and all aspects of human achievement. One in which families are bonded together and communities thrive. One of which young people feel fortunate to be a part. And that is what Reform will deliver. That is why people are joining us in such droves. Now, we're almost at the 6-month anniversary from when Nigel asked me to become chairman of this party. And we've achieved quite a lot together. Our membership has grown by almost 150%, from 68,000 to over 170,000. We've gone from no branches in this country to over 400 branches across the country. We've gone from 14% of the vote share in the election in July to 23% in the average of the polls. And let me tell you this, in case anyone thinks we're in the mood to slow down, on the contrary, we are just getting started. It's a truism in life that momentum and trajectory are much more important than absolute position. It's true in business, and it is certainly true in politics. And thanks to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, Reform has all of the momentum in British politics. But make no mistake, we still have a vast amount of work to do. And that's why we need your help. We need people like you to step up. We need your courage. We need your imagination. We need your energy. We need you to stand for us in candidates. In fact, you will see in the lobby there are members of our team and councillors, Reform councillors, whom you can discuss becoming a candidate with. We also need you to knock on doors for us and to campaign for Reform. Will you do that for us? Ladies and gentlemen, we work hard. The sky is the limit as to what we can achieve together. We will elect Nigel Farage as our Prime Minister. We will turn this country around and restore the United Kingdom to its rightful position as one of the greatest countries in the world. Thank you very much.
OK, thank you. We have just been listening to Zia Yousaf there addressing Reform faithful in Essex today. Obviously, heartland Tory area for Kemi Badenoch, indeed. So I'm still got Henry Bolton and Matthew Torbett with me now on the panel. We're going to react to that live speech you've just heard. Matthew, he was... The one thing I do notice, the main difference is how positive he talks, where compared to the Labour Party, where everything is doom and gloom. But mentioning the usual, tackling illegal migrants, stopping the boats, deporting people straight away, putting British people first, the cult of net zero, his words, not mine, cutting the civil service. It's a suffocating parasite. as Zia just called it, echoing Churchill, mentioning the family, mentioning younger people, and also appealing for people to stand as reform candidates. A lot of ground covered there. What did you make of what you had to hear?
I mean, suffocating parasites isn't exactly positive. I would say positive campaigns always trounce negative campaigns, and he's right to probably go positive. What I would say is it was about 7 minutes too long. I thought he's not an electoral asset, by the way. I think whatever people think of Nigel, he's a talented orator. Richard Tice has an air about him of people might like a stiff upper lip, posho sort of type. Lee Anderson has an appeal. That was like ChatGPT sort of.
Interesting you say that, because a couple of people have agreed with you.
No, I think I've seen planks of wood less wooden than that.
Right.
Now, if I was to tackle the substance of that,
Yeah,
and
that's
the
not a
use
political
of
point. That's just observing someone giving a speech.
I've advised politicians for years and done media training. That was dreadful by all standards. He talked about the Navy wading in, which sort of Henry spoke about with regards to channel crossings. My concerns with that is if somebody dies, who's responsible? Are certain elements of the Navy going to want to wade into the channel? Leaving the ECHR is a hot topic, and maybe it will work. My concern is it's being sold to us as a bit of a silver bullet, and as Henry rightly said, we left the EU and we're told we would control our borders. Anyone that looks at the TV today will see that actually they look more out of control than they ever have been. I did like the line about British people coming first. I think that will tap into a frustration that lots of people feel at the moment, as if people are jumping the queue ahead of them. I also don't know how they'll deport people to countries in which they came, because when you've got people ripping up passports and going, you know, I had to flee, you don't know where they've come from, and that brings its own issues, which is what I was talking about before we went to the speech. The independent inquiry stuff, hot topic. I think Labour need to handle this very carefully, and I support any look into how these girls have been failed. I think the problem you've got is there was an independent inquiry finished in 2022, and these things are expensive. It was nearly 200 million, as important as it is.
And nothing was acted on either.
Yeah, exactly. And the only other thing was that did make me chuckle, really, is someone that joined Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party and then worked for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. I'd love to know Jeremy's thoughts on what the left-wing media had to say, because they weren't very kind to us for 5 years, I'll tell you that. I wouldn't have minded if there was a left-wing media. But no, I think the substance was a rallying call and whatever, but I think they would be better served from a Nigel or a Lee Anderson speaking. He was the dreadful speaker.
OK. Right, we're going to come to you later on this, Henry, but at the moment we are going to talk to Carol Sikora about how there's a story on the front page of the Telegraph today about how migrants, there is a link here, are actually jumping the queue in many, alleged to be jumping the queue in many NHS areas, including A&E. So let's go to Carol Sikora now. Thank you. Carol, there you are. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, this is indeed the front page of the Telegraph today. What did you make of this when you read this report?
I thought it was very bizarre. I mean, we know the NHS struggles. Access for everybody is poor. I don't even know who my GP is. I mean, I know where the practice is, but I don't know who is my GP. I used to know. I used to be friends with the GP, a lovely lady, but all gone. Those days are gone. No one looks after me. I just have to, if I want something, I have to go along or prescribe for myself, that sort of thing. And I think to push any group of patients, other than those that are seriously ill, to the front of a queue is the beginning of a downward spiral. I mean, if you're going to push anybody, I'd push people that are working people, as Keir Starmer would call them, and people with children, because they need to be in and out quickly. But the other thing you could do is to fast-track people if they're willing to pay. But, you know, if you go to an emergency room, the standard wait is now 4 hours. Some people are waiting 12 hours. Now, the problem is why people are in the emergency room. Most of them don't need to be there. There are better ways they could get healthcare in general practice, in pharmacies and so on. But access to general practice is so poor that they end up there. Why would you want to prioritise and push to the front of the queue asylum seekers, people that are migrants, and so on? The only reason could be that if they had some sort of infectious diseases, and that's the excuse given by those that came up with the policy. To me, it's just a reflection that the NHS, instead of working on the right things, which is how to smarten up the front end of the service for everybody, focuses on the diversity agenda, and it's hired a whole lot of people as diversity officers. They've got to do something, and this is what they produced for us.
Yeah, this is a scheme called the 987 Inclusion Scheme, and it gives categories needing an urgent assessment can ask for an appointment at A&E, so they don't jump the queue, literally. And after initial tests, they are taken directly to a consultant for more thorough evaluation. This is something that many hospitals do around the country. Meanwhile, locals are, as you said, Carol, waiting at least a week before seeing a doctor, and more than 45,000 patients have been delayed for longer than 12 hours in A&E. I do find it strange, Carol, that even fouled asylum seekers, those who've had their asylum refused, can still register with a GP and a dentist, another area we have trouble with, and still get that care, even though, in theory, they should not still be in this country. This is why groups like Reform are doing so well, because people are angry. They feel that there is queue jumping going on.
I can tell you the doctors don't like it either. I mean, it seems if you've got a queue of people out there, maybe 50 people sitting there, some crying, some upset, many of them disturbed by what's happening to them. Maybe they've been in an accident, need stitching and so on, with a lot of emotion around the place. To select some based on any single criteria, colour of skin. Imagine if we suggested that. Your colour would get you priority, or maybe your height would get you priority, or if your body size would get you priority. It would be ridiculous. But this is the work of the diversity agenda within the NHS. Let's pick on something, let's push it to the front. And as I say, nobody knows how many diversity officers there are in the NHS, but it's certainly in the hundreds around the country. And they've come up, they sit in an office and come up with schemes like this, and we have to enact it all. So I think the future, it has got to be about making the service much better for just everybody, and not to select out any single group and push them to the front.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That's Professor Carol Sikora, oncologist, now on the story in front of the Telegraph today, saying that migrants are appearing to jump the goal, or given preferential medical treatment. Now, a spokesman for the Department of Health and Social Care says it is vital that all vulnerable members of society, including asylum seekers, are able to access the health care they need. And it has been a legal requirement under successive governments for local NHS commissioners to take the right steps through individual contracts to enable this. Our £26 billion investment in the NHS and reforms to the health service will make sure that it's there for everyone once again. OK, right, well, let's see what my panel make of this one. I still have broadcaster Matthew Talbot and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton with me. Henry, to a certain extent, this is the Telegraph doing what the Telegraph does, which is picking up on a story that it's been there for a while, but making a lot of it, putting it on the front page, saying asylum seekers are getting preferential treatment over you, the British taxpayer. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, Professor Skoya summed it up very well, and it should not be happening, and there are all manner of problems with the health service. But we could look at education as well. So one of the things in this report is the fact that I think a surprising number, I think it might be about 70%, of people require interpretation skills or translators out of this group, which is huge. But we've got the same problem in education. A couple of years ago, it was costing us 400 million, which on the scale of things is not huge, but 400 million to provide translation services for children at primary schools across the country. So we've got a problem across the board in all areas of government delivery. Healthcare, education, policing, the whole 9 yards. And as you quite rightly say, this is why reform is picking up momentum. It's not so much because of their policies, it's because they are telling us what we already know. And people know that we've got an immigration problem. People know that we've got a problem in education and in healthcare. They experience it day in and day out. If you ring my local GP surgery, you're going to be waiting 7 or 8 weeks for an appointment. So what the other parties have done is failed to listen, failed to act. Now, my problem with reform, and I'm going to get a lot of grief for this, I know, but it's all the genius of reform is their presentation skill combined with telling us what we already know. And people love a politician who agrees with them, who comes across as listening, or that they agree with. What reform doesn't tell us anything about It's how they will do all of these things. There's no detail there.
The detail.
And that's where the Conservatives went wrong. They didn't have a clue how they were going to do the things that they said they would do.
Come to you on this story. Just one incident that this report was pulled up in October. Residents in Nottingham were up in arms after the council ring-fenced £684,000 of funding for specialised healthcare access for asylum seekers and refugees. The same month, the GP surgery in the city had to close due to a lack of funding. I mean, you know, the NHS say this is because we are protecting very vulnerable. You've been a member of a very vulnerable group. You've been homeless yourself, so you know what it is like to be in that group of people that really do need help and often struggle to get the medical care that you need. So what do you make of this report in the Telegraph today?
I mean, it doesn't look great, and I think it is, you know, it is worth caveating, as you said. There's a lot of focus on the migrants and asylum seekers in this. It's also for homeless individuals and drug addicts who are obviously part of a vulnerable group. NHS England says it's focusing efforts on the most deprived 20% of the national population, of which many asylum seekers would come into. And I just wonder, and I might be wrong, whether the reason that they're maybe assisting asylum seekers or whatever is because asylum seekers don't have any recourse to public funds. So they're not allowed to work whilst they're here, obviously, whilst they're waiting for a claim. The only way they are allowed is if they wait for 12 months or more for an asylum claim to be processed. So therefore, they're not legally allowed to access the NHS, and whether they're making it more available to help people out or whatever. I think if you lifted the ban on asylum seekers being able to work, they'd be paying in, they could be treated like everybody else whilst they're waiting for their claim. And in a society where 77% of asylum claims are accepted, you know, the Treasury's lost out, I think it's £1 billion over the last decade, and they would make $250,000 in tax receipts every year from this. So I think that might play its part. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I have a feeling there's the recourse to public funds element that will play into that.
OK, fine, great.
But as Henry said quickly, this is why Reform do well. There looks like there's a bit of jumping of the queue going on here in the health service.
It does indeed. Thank you very much, Matthew. Now, if you need to escape all of this and in search for some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations for you.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Looking across southern parts of Europe for some winter sun on Sunday, and whilst in the west it's going to be quite wet but also relatively warm. A different story further east. Temperatures here around or a touch below average for the time of year, and a mixture of sunny breaks with a few outbreaks of rain. The wettest weather will be pushing across parts of Portugal and into western Spain, but here, like I said, temperatures above average for the time of year. Madeira, for example, getting into the low 20s Celsius. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Cryptocurrency entrepreneur Justin Sun spent $6.2 million, £4.9 million on a banana, duct taped to a wall, a piece of art by artist Mauricio Catalan. Other artwork has recently caused controversy. A portrait of the British computer scientist Alan Turing by the world's first ultra-realistic robot artist, that is to say ADAR, sold at auction for almost $1.1 million. Joining me now to talk about these latest hoo-has is art critic and mentor at the University of Arts London, Estelle Lovett. I have a feeling that in the case of the banana, it's quite a lot to do with the buyer. Now, you've researched the buyer a little bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Justin Sun?
Yes, so he's a very wealthy cryptocurrency dealer. And of course, you know, everything now is AI and FTs, and it's the way that money's going, and it's very good publicity for him. So obviously, you know, he's not daft. But what makes this banana so unusual is, and it has, as you say, taken the art world by storm. It is the current spectacle, and what's amazing is that even during these very difficult times, the art market still manages to spend big on a significant fuss. Why has it created this fuss? Well, don't forget, the winning bid just happened in a matter of minutes. It took Justin Sun minutes to beat 6 other rivals. So they've all got mega bucks in their pocket. But, you know, it's conceptual art at its best.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, it's a packed show, so thank you for keeping up with us. We are now going to talk about the weather, so I hope you're nice and warm and toasty indoors. Heavy snow is expected to hit parts of England and Wales this weekend, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption in some areas. The more severe warnings cover northern England, the Midlands and much of Wales, and are in place from this evening throughout Sunday, with 30 centimetres of snow expected in some areas. Joining me now is weather journalist Nathan Rao to explain. It's January, Nathan. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. But it is January. We do expect cold weather in January, don't we?
It is, Dawn. I mean, I suppose the good news, Dawn, is I can finally offer you a white Christmas. The bad news is it's about 2 weeks too late.
Right.
So it might not be Christmas, but it is certainly going to be white. And as you mentioned, there are numerous warnings in place throughout the whole of the weekend for some very, very heavy snow, up to a foot of snow in the north of England and the Midlands, as you said. But the whole of the country under these warnings for very disruptive weather over the next 24, 36 hours. As we get a blast from the north, bringing the cold air down, and a blast from the west, bringing the moisture in, and where the two come together, that's where we're going to get snow, and it's the whole of the country through the weekend. So very, very wintry outlook for the next 36 hours.
OK, and then does it get warmer again, or is this going to be sort of like hanging around for a while now, this weather?
No, this is going to be hanging around. The snow warnings are in place through the weekend, through tomorrow, and there's another warning on Monday. But the real problem is the cold. The cold weather is going to hang around really through the whole of next week. And on that note, there is a UK Health Security Agency cold weather health alert in place, really aimed at the elderly and vulnerable, where in this type of weather it is a challenge, quote, to keep houses at 18 degrees above and below, which is where the problem starts. So really, really important. When these very, very cold temperatures strike, and we are looking at below minus double figures this week, but certainly for elderly, vulnerable people, make sure you keep your houses warm and take care of the cold, because that is where the danger is going to be.
It's obviously very good advice, Nathan, but many of them are terrified to put their heating on thanks to the government taking their winter fuel allowance away from them.
I was absolutely going to say, you know, the UK government is saying that it's going to be a challenge, and this is on the UK Health Security Agency's website, a challenge for the elderly to heat their homes to 18 degrees Celsius. But as you said, they've all had their winter fuel allowances taken off, because it doesn't seem to be a priority for our government to look after the elderly who've been paying to the system all their lives at this time of year to keep safe and warm during the winter. Not a question for me, that's one to ask them, I suppose. I suppose they've got their reasons for doing so. But yes, I mean, I was talking to my mother yesterday, and the first thing she said is, God, it's so cold. I'm a bit worried to put my heating on. And I said, just put it on and we'll pay it later. But not everyone has got that luxury. I don't know what the mentality is behind it. I don't agree with it, but that is the stage, and it is going to be very, very cold.
Nathan, thank you very much for joining us with that white Christmas you always promised me just 2 weeks later. That's weather journalist Nathan Rao there. Thank you very much. OK, so finally, just thanks to Matthew Talbot and Henry Bolton, my wonderful panel. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. We'll be live from Reform UK. But first, let's get more of the weather for you.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there. It's a cold weekend to come for most, with outbreaks of rain, snow and ice. Amber warnings for snow and ice across parts of England and Wales through this weekend. So there could be some tricky travelling conditions worth checking before leaving the house through this weekend. Low pressure moving in from the southwest, bumping into colder air, leading to that risk of snow and ice, and already rain across the southwest where temperatures are rising, but snow across Wales, the Midlands, down into London, northwards through the evening time, pushing into northern England, eastern England as we head into the early hours. Outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. By the end of the night, temperatures under clear skies well below freezing, -7, -8 Celsius. Icy stretches, but mild across the south. Outbreaks of heavy rain developing here, but it is really the focus of the snow. We do have rain, sleet and snow across northern Scotland. Icy stretches first thing Sunday morning across the country as temperatures are widely below freezing. Icy stretches Northern Ireland, but it's really parts of northern England, North Wales where the snow will be heavy and treacherous, perhaps up to 40 centimetres over the higher ground in places. Rain further south, but leading to the risk of some flooding as the snow melts here. Quite breezy too as the rain continues through the day, but it is really the focus of the snow, particularly across northern England and southern Scotland as we go through the day and afternoon on Sunday. Some brighter skies trying to push into the far northwest, but temperatures really struggling here, not much above freezing, but very mild across the south and southeast here, temperatures 13 or 14 Celsius with that southerly breeze. The risk of flooding into the evening time as further rain is expected across some southern and western parts. The snow continuing parts of Scotland right through into Monday as well. And it stays cold next week for many, temperatures below average with the further risk of snow at times. See you soon.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£50,000 in tax-free cash is like having over £4,000 each month to play with for a whole year. And it could be yours in the biggest Great British giveaway so far. That could be a holiday each month, your mortgage covered, or just the ability to send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The way in which children are being driven online because we're not taking them seriously offline. And what we're tending to do is seeing the problems entirely on the social media, forgetting the fact that we've given up on children being able to work independently and play independently outdoors. We've basically created a world where the digital bedroom has become this go-to area for a lot of young kids. We've given up on old-fashioned parenting, where we try to cultivate their resilience. And now we blame everything, all the problems that occur online. You have to remember that if you take something like bullying, bullying, doesn't have to only take place online. It happens all the time, offline, in everyday life. But yet we only see the problem on the social media. And there's this obsession with the social media where every single problem that afflicts childhood is blamed on it. And that distracts us from actually understanding what we're doing wrong with children. So for me, and I hate when I see children with digital technology, when I see them with smartphones. I'm not a fan. I'm much more concerned about the fact that parents, use their digital phones when they're having dinner with their kids and giving very bad examples in relation to that. But the real problem, it seems to me, is offline, and that's why we got to crack the issue. So for me, the banning issue is entirely a headline-grabbing political gambit. And I think that we should be much more focused on the real problems rather than delude ourselves that anything will improve.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 4th of January, and this is the weekend on GB News. Now, Reform UK are rallying in Kemi Badenoch's constituency this afternoon as Nigel Farage promises the gloves are off. The gathering comes as an election predictor says Reform are just 6 points off becoming the biggest party in Parliament. And Sir Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone I know, says a grooming gang whistleblower who has accused the Prime Minister of widespread failure in his handling of the scandal. I'll be joined by the former MP for Rochdale, who says he was told not to raise the ethnicity of grooming gangs due to adverse electoral impact. It's really not one you want to miss. And as you've been hearing, blizzards to batter Britain as fresh weather warnings are issued by the Met Office. It comes as the NHS tells the public not to go outside in the early mornings or late night. But do we all really need to just employ a bit more common sense than we're given credit for here? I'm Dawn Neeson and this is The Weekend. So thank you very much for joining me on this. It's decidedly chilly Saturday in early January. I really appreciate your company, but it's the best place to be. Stay inside, stay warm, have a cup of tea, maybe a leftover mince pie, and watch the rest of the show because it is an absolutely jam-packed show and we have more from Nigel Farage and Reform coming up. But this show is all about you and your views. So get in touch with your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing or anything you want to have a chat about. It's very easy to get involved. Visit gbnews.com/your say and join our conversation. And I will read as many as your messages out as I possibly can. I do promise that. Now, keeping me company this hour is Labour Party activist Chris Worrell and Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. But before we get stuck into today's stories, here are the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. King Charles is deeply saddened by the death of a British man who was killed when an alleged Islamic State supporter drove a truck into crowds celebrating the New Year in New Orleans. 31-year-old Edward Pettifer is believed to be the stepson of Prince William and Prince Harry's nanny when they were younger, known as Tiggy. The King has been in touch with Mr Pettifer's family to share his personal condolences. Meanwhile, the FBI believe the man who drove the truck is believed to have acted alone. Shamsuddin Jabbar's rented truck rammed into crowds in New Orleans, killing 15 and injuring dozens. This comes as the FBI say there is no definitive link between that attack and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas, after the driver was confirmed as active-duty American soldier Matthew Livelsberger. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has said the gloves are off and vows to ramp up his campaigning efforts in Kemi Badenoch's constituency of North West Essex. It follows claims from the Conservative leader that Reform's online membership tracker was fake, despite several news outlets reporting they have seen the party's membership data and believe the tracker is accurate. Speaking moments ago at the Reform rally in Kemi Badenoch's constituency, Reform UK chairman Zia Youssef thanked the Tory leader.
We all know that we should be very grateful to Kemi. We should be very grateful to the leader of the Tory party, because in the preceding 24 hours of her ill-advised outburst, Reform UK signed up more members than in any 24-hour period in our entire history. So can we please give a big Reform round of applause to Kemi Badenoch?
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has distanced himself from Elon Musk's support for Tommy Robinson. The Reform UK leader has said Robinson is not what we need after Elon Musk praised the imprisoned right-wing activist. Mr Musk, the tech billionaire and supporter of Mr Farage, retweeted posts on X describing Robinson as a political prisoner and separately said Britain needs reform now. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs, according to the whistleblower Maggie Oliver, who helped expose the scandal. The chairman of Reform UK, Zia Youssef, has said the party would launch an independent inquiry into grooming gangs if elected into power. It follows mounting pressure on the government to deliver a public inquiry into the gangs that systematically groomed and raped young girls. Meanwhile, former Met Police detective Peter Blexley told GB News people have allowed these crimes to happen.
The scale of the raping of children by these gangs is so wide and has gone on for so long and was allowed to happen because of various agencies not doing their job properly. It is such a serious matter. So many lives have been destroyed. We must do everything possible to ensure it never happens again. And I therefore think that a wide-reaching public inquiry with all the statutory powers so that it could compel people to give evidence is the very least that the victims deserve.
GB News can exclusively reveal that the first boatload of 50 illegal migrants this year has crossed the English Channel. A Border Force vessel picked up 50 migrants from their small boat early this morning and drove them back to Dover. It comes after nearly 37,000 people made the treacherous journey in small boats last year. The UK is braced for heavy snow and icy rain this weekend, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption. 2 amber and 2 yellow alerts have been issued for most of the country, with up to 30 centimetres of snow expected. Forecasters say power cuts are likely and that vehicles could become stranded on roads as wintry conditions continue. Trains and flights could also be delayed or cancelled. A judge has ordered Donald Trump to be sentenced next week in his New York hush money case, but he has suggested the US president-elect will not be jailed. In a surprise move, the sentencing has been set for the 10th of January, just 10 days before the presidential inauguration. Trump's spokesperson called the case lawless and a witch hunt in a statement released after the date was announced. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Sam Francis will have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophia, and thank you out there for joining us this afternoon. We really have an incredibly busy show for you, so we're going to get straight on to the stories we're talking about. So Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs, according to the whistleblower Maggie Oliver, who helped expose the entire scandal. The former Greater Manchester police detective who helped uncover widespread abuse in Rochdale said she had no faith that the Prime Minister wanted to get the truth, and it was time for those responsible to be held fully accountable. I'm actually very happy to say now that joining me is former Labour MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk. Simon, thank you very much for coming in. This is an incredibly difficult conversation to have because so many thousands of girls, children, have suffered at the hands of what's been going on for decades. Now, you were a former Rochdale MP and you were warned by senior Labour figures not to mention the ethnicity of the perpetrators of these crimes at the time because it could affect your party electorally. Can you tell us more about what happened?
Yeah, so to provide a little bit of context, I was the MP for Rochdale from 2010 to 2017. The Rochdale grooming scandal came to light in 2012, so I was a newly elected MP then. And I believed quite strongly that ethnicity and religion were a factor in why these perpetrators committed the crime that they did. And I started to say that in the media because I think it helps with coming up with a solution. Now, Jim Dobbin, who was the local Labour MP next door to me, warned me, said to me, listen, you're better off not mentioning ethnicity. It doesn't help us electorally. More chillingly, and I say that because he was the chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party, so a very senior figure, Tony Lloyd said to me in 2012 in the corridors in Parliament, listen, ethnicity is not a factor in this. I don't think you should mention it. it will cost us votes. He was running to be the Labour Police Commissioner for Greater Manchester at the time. He clearly thought it would affect his electoral chances. And it's not just me saying this. He made a speech in Westminster Hall in 2012 saying the same thing about ethnicity. I ignored them and continued to call it out. Ethnicity and religion clearly played a factor in how they treated those vulnerable white young girls. Absolutely appalling.
So we are saying that political careers were more important than the lives of children.
Well, absolutely. That's how it was seen. There's no doubt about that. And there are other instances. This isn't just me saying this. Keith Vaz, who was the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, he said ethnicity wasn't a factor. And we know from the investigations that were done into Rotherham by Louise Casey and others that Labour councillors had clearly played a role in covering it up. Labour is quite clearly culpable in having covered this type of abuse up. There is no doubt in my mind, and there are questions that have to be answered. The other example I would give you is that from 2012, when I discovered this type of abuse taking place, for 3 or 4 years onwards, I campaigned very heavily on this issue. Myself and just 1 or 2 others campaigned heavily on this, and at no time did the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, come to me and ask me about the crimes that were taking place. I found that most peculiar, not least because Theresa May, the Home Secretary, would ring me at home to discuss it. I had meetings with her. David Cameron, the Prime Minister, called me to a summit about the very issue, and yet the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, didn't discuss it with me at all. Peculiar.
And many of the people that have spoken out about this, as you did at the time, and fair play to you, have suffered appalling, Maggie herself, death threats.
Yeah, no, I know Maggie very well. We met during the course of the scandal around Rochdale, and we worked together in terms of campaigning. She's just won the Contrarian Award for her campaigning on this very issue. I won it 5, 6, 8 to 9 years ago for a similar reason. So she's been a great whistleblower, but she's been treated appallingly. You're exactly right. And the police have a lot to answer. Greater Manchester Police, I wrote for the Daily Mail, I think in 2014, saying that Peter Fay, the Chief Constable, should resign. He should have been sacked. By that time, Tony Lloyd was the police commissioner, the Labour police commissioner, defending him.
And why do you think that, we are, or the Labour Party are now not going to hold a full inquiry? We know that several of the victims have spoken out and saying, we want another inquiry. We want actually a full inquiry. We want heads to roll. We want people to face the justice they should have faced decades ago. This is still going on in our towns.
Oh, yeah, we should have an inquiry. I'm fully supportive of that. It needs to be truly independent, so a different kind of inquiry to what's gone before. It has to be effective, independent. You can't have Labour ministers setting the terms of reference for this. They'll set them to suit their own political ends. So it has to be independent, and it has to have real power to be able to insist on people coming to give evidence, and even making recommendations for prosecution, not least of public servants, of politicians and perpetrators.
And do you think Labour are not going through with this because they are still worried about losing that Muslim vote?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. That's what a lot of this has been about. They lost seats in the general election to independent Muslim candidates.
Yeah, and many cabinet ministers held on to their seats by a very fine margin to independents.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're losing seats to this, and I do believe that's one of the reasons that Jess Phillips, who's the minister responsible in the Home Office for calling for a national inquiry, is rejecting this.
That's appalling. That is putting a political career in front of young girls who are still being targeted in these towns.
Oh, I would argue that Labour have played politics with this for far too long. They've done similar in relation to the Middle East. It's not unusual, I have to say, for them to play politics with highly sensitive issues.
And do you think the fact that we're so obsessed with not mentioning, the ethnic background and the religion of the majority of men involved in these gangs is because we're so worried about blowing the myth of this multicultural society that we're all meant to believe is a wonderful and beneficial thing. Yeah. And we're worried about revealing the truth that actually it's pretty rotten at its core.
Yeah, that's why the prosecutions weren't made. That's why the policing didn't take it properly at the time that it should have done. There's no doubt about that. It was all about supporting multiculturalism. Peter Fay, after the Rochdale grooming scandal, straight after, came to Rochdale Town Hall for a public meeting and said some of the first words he said was, "I've come here to celebrate multiculturalism." The insensitivity of saying that to the community is incredible. It's not surprising that I call for his resignation.
So, I mean, obviously, the front page of the Daily Mail today, Starmy is as guilty as anyone over the grooming gangs. I mean, considering how guilty some people are who are involved in this, are very, very strong words from Maggie Oliver.
Yeah, that's from Maggie Oliver. I agree with her. He was the Director for Public Prosecutions from 2008 till 2013. He only got involved in 2012 in the Rochdale grooming scandal, so there were 4 years before that when grooming was quite clearly going on. Anne Cryer, the Labour MP in Keighley, called it out many years before.
Yes, okay,
yeah, absolutely. So there's been one or two whistleblowers. Not many parliamentarians, I have to say. Sarah Champion, credit to her, in Rotherham, Anne Cryer, one or two others. But it's been around for many years, and he could have took more action sooner. And I think that's probably the point that Maggie's making.
Do you think the girls will ever get justice, the justice they deserve?
I think we're on the cusp of getting an independent inquiry, an inquiry that's different from ever before. But we have to stay focused. People are talking about Elon Musk, they're talking about Tommy Robinson, they're talking about Katie Hopkins. Let's focus on the victims. This inquiry is about the victims and nobody else.
Who are, many of them are supporting the fact that Simon Denchuk, thank you very much. OK, let's bring the panel in on this one. And you have your say. This is such an important story, gbnews.com/your say. Now, we have a Labour Party activist, Chris Worrell, and Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. I'm going to come to you first on this one. Chris, what do you make of what you've just heard Simon say, what you've seen Maggie say about Keir Starmer? What do you make of the whole thing?
Well, look, Dawn, I mean, as a father of a young daughter, you know, when I read these accounts, it does make you sick, and you kind of think about what you'd do if you were one of the parents. But
well, interesting point you made there, because many of the dads, and you talk as a dad, went to the houses where their girls were being held and raped, and the dads were arrested. The girls were accused of being drunk and disorderly.
Yeah, and let's get to that. I think, you know, Labour's ambition now is to halve violence against women and girls over the next decade. You know, when Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions, he called for mandatory reporting, so it's illegal to turn the blind eye to that. We've had a wasted decade. Well, Simon, I didn't interrupt you.
Well, they haven't.
We had a wasted decade, right, of inaction by the Tory government, right? And we cannot be, when there is women and children and fathers getting arrested for turning up trying to get their kids out of that. We cannot be ignoring the fact that Tories wasted a decade. What did Keir Starmer do? Right, there has been some changes while he was in as a DPP. Right, he immediately admitted the failures of that department, unlike other institutions, including the police, where they've had missing documents. So you can't even name the officers that held some of these cases. You've had, a huge review that the CPS changed things like victims' right to review where the CPS didn't prosecute. He brought that in. You had 80 specialist prosecutors be put in place, so actual specialists were dealing with these cases. And then the guidelines he's put in were commended by the Tories, the Secretary of State for Justice, the Attorney General, Theresa May, the inquiry, where they said it's extraordinary changes, so it's a model for other institutions. So now the Labour Party is committed to implementing the last 7-year, £100 million inquiry at ICSA. We say we haven't got one. Do we want one over 7 years? My child might be at the age that they could be groomed by that point. I am not waiting for that. So the Labour Party is going to be putting in the place recommendations from the ICSA inquiry, and they're going to be putting in the mandatory reporting, which the Tories failed to do.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I do, actually. Mandatory reporting could have been implemented from day one. They've made loads of decisions, but they haven't done it yet. So we'll wait and see. But the truth is, Starmer has a very poor record as Director of Public Prosecutions, whether we're talking about Jimmy Savile, whether we're talking about Alfie...
We're talking about child grooming.
Well,
Simon.
you were determined not to interrupt. We're talking about sexual abuse. He has a poor record on Jimmy Savile, on Al Fayed, and on grooming. The national inquiry is what people are calling for. So
We've had one, 7 years.
No, that was on historic abuse. That was about Westminster and historical cases. This is about the victims now. I tell you what, Chris.
9 reports.
If you're so determined,
15 investigations.
If you're so determined to make a positive impression, why don't you, on behalf of Labour, now apologise for how Labour have behaved in relation to these? I don't care.
We have got someone that's like throwing out the Labour Party, giving it beans about the Labour Party. Stick to the facts.
Labour have ignored this and are culpable in terms of trying to brush it under the carpet. Why don't you apologise on Labour's behalf? Why don't you apologise on Labour's behalf?
Disgusting. Don't be giving me none of that. You want to take the gloves off?
I'm happy to take the gloves off. The truth is, people like Tony Lloyd, Jim Dobbin...
You can have your problems with them.
Yvette Cooper and others have ignored this subject and allowed it to be brushed under the carpet because they were scared of losing votes. You should at least apologise for that.
They're implementing the recommendations of the ICSA report. They're bringing a mandatory reporting which has been ignored for 10 years, a wasted decade under the Tories.
OK, let's bring Henry, who is a deputy editor of Conservative Home. Henry, let's bring you in. Henry Hill, what would you like to say?
On which aspect of this?
With any aspect you'd like to pick, to be honest with you.
I think the thing that is immensely frustrating for people is that we say we've had inquiries. We have had inquiries, and all of the public institutions involved have had their own internal inquiries. But what there haven't been is consequences, because what all of these inquiries do is that they go, yes, well, we've got lessons learned, and we're going to be taking things forward and changing X, Y, and Z, which is not worthless, but people failed in these institutions, and they failed in a way that left thousands of vulnerable girls to be horrifically abused. And there should be consequences. And when we spend years and years and all the expense on an inquiry, and at the end of that process there is no justice, there is no responsibility, that is what makes the public incredibly angry. Now, you're right, another inquiry would take absolutely years because the way that we do inquiries in this country is deeply flawed. But on the basis of the current inquiries, there's no accountability for the people whose failures allowed this to happen. And I think that that's what the public need, and that's what the government needs to be trying to find a way to do. Identify individuals who had a responsibility for stopping this, who failed to do it, and make sure that in some way, shape or form, even if it's just losing their job or their public sector pension, they are held accountable for what they did.
I agree with that. It does, in terms of the inquiry, it needs to be a smart, independent inquiry. It can't be the type of inquiry that's gone before. It has to be independent. It can't have the terms of reference set by Labour ministers. They're culpable. It has to be independent. It has to have the power to call people and the power to prosecute. That would allow us to get some real action in terms of supporting the victims.
The independent reviews are independent. In Rotherham, it was, Alex
there were no prosecutions from it.
You don't prosecute from an inquiry.
Well, what about Sean Wright?
Zero arrests.
Sean Wright, the police commissioner, the Labour police commissioner in South Yorkshire, was clearly culpable. He had to resign because of it.
Why haven't the police arrested their own?
Well, exactly. Well, why do you think? Because they're marking their own homework. Right. That's why it has to be an inquiry like the type that Henry is describing.
How can you... They don't arrest at the end of inquiry. They don't arrest at an inquiry.
Why don't you stand with the people, Chris?
Review. I am
stand with the people and the victims.
Victims' Rights Review, cases
and let's
where they
have
didn't
a new
prosecute.
independent
Victims' Rights
inquiry.
Review, where they didn't prosecute, is a way these victims can get justice. Waiting another 7 years with another 100... Boris Johnson said it's spaffed £60 million. The Tories do not care about this. Reform haven't got any idea...
We're talking about now.
You know, you've got Rupert Lowe talking about when he was Southampton chairman, what happened there with the scandals that were going on. We've got to have people like Jess Phillips, who are experts in the area, who read out every year women's names that are killed, who has dealt, her mate was murdered, Joe Cox, as a result of, whipping up tensions. Here we're talking about children that are groomed. And
Chris.
Implementing the inquiry's recommendations that has in there anything that they need to set out, they can make reforms off the back of that. Just get on with implementing the recommendations.
As Labour, why don't you stand with the victims and the British public and support a smart, independent inquiry that results in action against the public servants, against the police and against politicians and against the perpetrators?
GMCA, 4 reviews. Rotherham, 9 reviews. Inquiry, 15 reports. We don't need any more reports. We need delivery. And I think
we want prosecutions. We want prosecutions, Chris.
There's been a lot
and
of
you aren't prepared to support them because some of your colleagues are culpable.
I'm not interested in the politics of what you had in your area. Right? I'm interested in
you want to defend Labour politicians.
I'm defending the fact that
this
the Labour
is a cross-party issue, Chris.
Party that will
this isn't about party politics.
We're not going to have another wasted decade of inaction. We're going to get on with implementing the ICSA report.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, I have to interrupt. This is such an important conversation. The only thing I would say is that men many of the victims themselves, who are now grown women, say they would like to see a proper, full, independent inquiry and people facing the justice that they have not faced so far. But that might be a bit too close to home for some people. OK, thank you very much for that one, gentlemen. We do have to move on. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's incredibly packed show. The Prime Minister with a thorn in his side. Starmer continues to face heavy criticism from Donald Trump and Elon Musk. How much of a problem could they prove to be as the President-elect takes office? All of that and much more to come. Phew, what a show. This is GB News, Britain's news channel, and you really don't want to go too far. We'll see you very soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Love a bit of baking and share some hot tips. We're delighted to be joined by our baking extraordinaire, Matty Edgell, who won Great British Bake Off last year. Woo! Welcome. Congratulations as well. I'm sure you're sick of being congratulated.
And there's a nice reminder.
No, you like all the glory.
Yeah.
What was it like winning the Great British Bake Off? What's last year been like for you?
Winning it was I was not expecting to win. At any point until they said my name.
You're a very humble
nice
guy.
Surprise. No,
really?
In touch with reality. Yeah, no, I wasn't.
Was it quite a close race throughout then?
Yeah, I considered myself the underdog throughout. I think the first week I turned around after the showstopper and kind of saw how good everyone was, and then looked at mine and thought, how have I got here? And that kind of theme followed through.
But then that surely like an underdog one.
Yeah, it did.
Actually, I'm going to get better throughout this.
Yeah, I think it made me kind of like really tune into the feedback that they was giving me and trying to embed that throughout. So that's probably why.
Could you feel yourself improving as the series went on?
Definitely, and I think also, like, kind of simultaneously, my confidence improved at the same time, and then that, like, little bit of belief in myself probably helped out as well.
What was your strength? Biscuits, cake, bread?
I think cake's my strength.
Cake.
I think cake, typically, if you start baking, that's probably where you start, isn't it? So that was what I knew most.
How did you start baking?
I've been asked this so many times since...
You don't know?
I attribute it to my nan.
Oh,
sweet. But, yeah, I would say... I think most people probably attribute it to, like, a grandparent or something that they maybe done with, like, their parents when they was growing up. So that's... I'll give it to my nan.
Or the major lockdown baking boom.
Yeah, banana bread.
Everybody...
All over the place, isn't it? It's good.
Yeah, it's really good. I love a banana bread, even now.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you for your company this afternoon. Now, Sir Keir Starmer's focus on the NHS and domestic priorities is being threatened by heavy criticism from Donald Trump and Elon Musk. The President-elect has criticised the government's decision to increase the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas. Musk potentially donated to Nigel Farage's reform, escalated his attacks after Labour dismissed calls for a public inquiry into grooming gangs. How much of a thorn in Starmer's side will Trump and Musk prove to be for the Prime Minister? Let's see what my panel make of this. I still have with me Chris Worrell, Labour Party activist and Deputy Editor of a Conservative home, Henry Hill. Henry, we didn't get to hear from you much in the last debate, which was, you know, a very important contribution that you did make. But what do you make of this one? I mean, I can't get my head round how obsessed Elon Musk is with British politics.
I mean, it sort of makes sense. You think about the fact that he's a sort of Anglo-South African who grew up in South Africa at a point when the British Afrikaner distinction was one of the main racial divides. So he's got a long connection with the country. I'm not entirely... I think what's funny is that lots and lots of British politicians, and this is sort of deep irritation to me, are hopelessly America-brained, right? They read Robert Caro, they grew up on the West Wing, they constantly think about American politics, constantly talk about American politics, and then all of a sudden, American politicians start acting as if actually, you know, it is that kind of relationship and everyone hates it, don't they? Oh, my God, we wish they'd leave us alone. I'm not entirely sure in the short term these particular interventions that we've had for Sir Keir Starmer definitely... anything tying Nigel Farage to Tommy Robinson is obviously deeply unhelpful.
Nigel Farage has hit back at that, hasn't he?
Nigel Farage has hit back at that. The oil and gas one, I think, is more interesting because, again, there's a point there, right? America is delivering amazing GDP per capita growth.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is that it is unlocking its natural energy.
Trump said, drill, baby, drill.
Right, oil and gas reserves. Sure. And the other really baffling thing about oil especially is that we need oil even if we don't burn it, right? Oil is essential to make plastic. There's no suggestion that we're going to stop needing plastic. Petrochemical industry is going to quadruple in size globally by 2050. So that British oil could still be incredibly useful for British manufacturing and export. So the decision to ban new licences is extremely short-sighted. Whether or not it will make a practical difference, I think it all depends on whether or not Musk hands over that money.
Well, that is the big thing here. We don't know, don't we? Musk, who is expected to make a big donation, we don't know, to Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Now, coming to you, Chris, on this one. Musk having a go at Starmer on the grooming gangs says has failed to prosecute the gangs of groomed rape girls. So Musk said Starmer was complicit in the rape of Britain when he was head of Crown prosecution for 6 years. Starmer must go and he must face charges for his complicity in the worst mass crimes in British history. What do you make to that?
Well, I mean, I think the polls recently about British public opinion on Elon Musk is telling, because he doesn't come across, you know, like he's being that sensible. I think he's turning a lot of people off the kind of politics he's pushing. You know, from Tesla to Tommy Robinson, you know, the latest stunt...
Which Farage has hit back on, yes.
The latest stunt is just sort of plugging reform into the sort of ultra-conservative, hyper-nationalist right wing. And, you know, while his billions and his Twitter spin might kind of spark, you know, debate online, I think it's going to damage reform's material credibility if he's funding reform while making, you know, Jess Phillips has got police security. When you're going online writing stuff like that, which is, let's just be honest, not quite, you know, I don't know if he'd been on his ketamine or anything like that, but it was on something, because I don't think many people would be writing that in a sound mind. But we've got to be careful with the language that we use. Yes, we can have fierce debate and I believe in free speech, but that kind of incendiary, you know, comments are just...
Well, you mentioned Jess Phillips getting threats and having to have personal... A lot of the threats she got were for her own constituency during the election campaign. I mean, she was threatened because she was a woman doing a job that maybe some people don't think women should be doing. So she didn't have an easy time of it during the election campaign.
No,
so it's not just the right saying things.
Joe Cox was a victim of, you know, extremist views.
Of course, no, absolutely. I mean, I was, you know, quite friendly with Jo Cox. She lived near me, so I fully appreciate the language we use around politicians. You know, the rhetoric does have to be dialed down. But it is interesting that he is getting so. The language he uses is very strong in this instance.
Well, it's like the language of Tommy Robinson. That's why he agrees with him. You know, when we talk about Donald Trump, maybe on the hand, you know, I think there's a bit more of a positive outlook there with him and Keir Starmer. They both had a good joint call, sort of ambition to strengthen that UK relationship. You know, they're focused around, you know, the main three things of international security, economic growth and prosperity. You know, there's clearly sort of a bit of banter between the two where, you know, OK, maybe Trump was lashing out at the net zero things that Henry's pointed out, saying that the coyotes are going to need weight loss injections.
Yes,
they're going to get so fat from hitting the wind turbines. But, you know, Labour's goals are for, you know, to break away from these reliance on foreign imports of you know, energy and going to a 95% renewable strategy. You know, I'd like to see some more nuclear in there personally. By 2030 is a good ambition.
Henry, do you think... I mean, we've seen Kemi Badenoch fighting back and having a go when Nigel Farage sort of attacked her. Now, but Keir Starmer has said nothing about what Elon Musk has said. Do you think he should come out fighting, or do you think he should never complain, never explain, like the late Queen?
I mean, as a question purely of tactics, I just don't think that it is currently a good idea for the Prime Minister to be giving more media time to the Rotherham stuff. I'm not saying this is a moral point, but I'm saying if you're his grid manager, do you want to be propping up that media cycle? Do you want his face on those stories? No, I don't think so. You want to be talking about whatever it is that the government's agenda is for that day. So I think that's why he's doing it. You also, ideally, if you don't want to intervene, you want to have a response, right? You want to have a thing that you can point to. Now, it's historically that is usually announcing another inquiry that will respond before the next ice age. But maybe, so you need something, because otherwise you're just saying he's wrong, actually, and then that goes on the front of all of tomorrow's newspapers. So that's why I think he's not doing it. It does obviously keep it in the spotlight, but again, the challenge for Musk, who clearly does not have a great feel for British politics, is if you want to be pressuring the government on that story, you don't want to be tying it to Tommy Robinson, because Tommy Robinson is pure poison.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to be fair, I mean, we keep talking about Tommy Robinson. Nigel Farage last night said Tommy Robinson is not what Reform UK needs. This is after Elon Musk called for his release from prison. Farage claimed, attacking the billionaire was attacking the leadership of Britain. And he says, we are a political party and we do not need Tommy Robinson. So he has fought back about that one. Right, thank you very much for now, gentlemen. We do move on. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's show. We're looking ahead to Nigel Farage's address to the Reform members, which will take place very shortly. It's after Chairman Zia Youssef asked the Chelmsford Conference to give a big Reform round of applause to Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. Just after 2:30. The top story this hour. The King has said he is deeply saddened by the death of Edward Pettifer, a British man killed in an attack in New Orleans on New Year's Day. The 31-year-old was the stepson of Prince William and Prince Harry's former nanny. The Prince of Wales and his wife, Princess Catherine, have, in fact, in the last few minutes released a statement. Let's just bring that to you now. It says, Catherine and I have been shocked and saddened by the tragic death of Ed Pettifer. That's after his former nanny's stepson was named among those killed in the New Year's Day attack, as I say, in New Orleans. We also understand that Pettifer's relatives are being supported by specialist officers as they prepare to bring his body home to the UK. If you're watching on television, you can see that latest statement there, just posted on the official Kensington Royal account. Police, in the meantime, have said in the US that the suspect, Shamsuddin Jabbar, drove a truck into crowds, killing 14 people and injuring at least 35 before being shot by police. The FBI have also confirmed an Islamic State flag was found in the vehicle, with President Biden linking the attack to terrorist motives. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage says the gloves are off, vowing to ramp up his campaigning in Kemi Badenoch's constituency today. It follows claims from the Conservative leader that Reform's online membership tracker was fake. That's despite several news outlets reporting the membership data was indeed accurate. Speaking earlier at the Reform event in North West Essex, Reform UK chairman Zia Youssef poked fun at Kemi Badenoch.
We all know that we should be very grateful to Kemi. We should be very grateful to the leader of the Tory party, because in the preceding 24 hours of her ill-advised outburst, Reform UK signed up more members than in any 24-hour period in our entire history. So can we please give a big Reform round of applause to Kemi Badenoch?
Whistleblower Maggie Oliver has said that Sir Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs, according to whistleblower Maggie Oliver, who, of course, helped to expose the scandal. The chairman of Reform UK, Zia Youssef, as you've just heard there, has said the party would launch an independent inquiry into grooming gangs if elected into power. That follows mounting pressure on the Labour government to deliver a public inquiry into the gangs that sadly systemically groomed and raped young girls. We've also been hearing from the Reform UK leader, who has said that Tommy Robinson is not what we need after Elon Musk praised the imprisoned right-wing activist. Mr Musk, the tech billionaire and supporter of Mr Farage, retweeted posts on X describing Robinson as a political prisoner and separately said Britain needs reform now. Well, let's turn to the latest news on migrant arrivals here in the UK. And GB News can today reveal that the first boatload of 50 illegal migrants has crossed the English Channel this year. A Border Force vessel picked up 50 migrants from their small boat earlier this morning and is currently on the way back to Dover. It comes after nearly 37,000 people made the treacherous journey in small boats last year. And weather news, the UK is braced for heavy snow and icy rain this weekend, with the Met Office warning there could be considerable disruption in some areas. 2 amber and 2 yellow alerts have been issued by the Met Office across the country, with up to 30 centimetres of snow expected. Forecasters also say power cuts are likely and that vehicles could become stranded on roads as wintry conditions continue. And trains and flights could also be delayed or even cancelled. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you at the top of the hour, and Dawn will be back with you after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. From the Met Office, we have already issued amber warnings across many parts of the UK. Snow and ice, a real feature of the forecast through this weekend. There'll be some troublesome travelling conditions. An area of low pressure coming in from the southwest, bumping into cold air across the country. An icy start this morning. So a bright start across central northern parts for a few wintry showers around northern Scotland, seeing some sleet and snow. But it's as this band of rain pushes into the southwest, we could see some temporary snow over the moors, and then slowly through the day this pushes northwards, leading to an increasing risk of snow and ice. Temperatures for the afternoon really struggling despite any hazy sunshine, only a few degrees above freezing, so icy stretches still possible. But it is into this evening time as this band of rain starts to push northwards, bumps into the colder air. We see it turn to snow, even to lower levels across parts of Wales. Further north, it is a drier end to the evening, but it won't be long before the rain, sleet and snow pushes in. Temperatures falling below freezing across Scotland under the clearest skies, sleet and snow still across Orkney and Shetland as well. Met Office warnings out through the day. Amber warnings coming in force for this evening as this band of rain, sleet and snow pushes northwards. 3 to 10 centimetres possible to lower levels, perhaps even locally 15 to 30, and then over the higher ground 30 to 40 centimetres over northern parts of England. Turning back to rain the further south you are as milder air starts to move in, but temperatures falling below freezing, especially under the clear skies across Scotland, with some icy stretches developing, also icy stretches for Northern Ireland. So a hazardous start to a Sunday morning across the country. Outbreaks of rain, snow as well, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. It is worth checking before leaving the house. Drier in the south, windy, temperatures well above average here, 13-14 Celsius.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you very much for your company on this chilly January Saturday. So best stay in the warm, put your feet up, have a cup of tea and carry on watching the show because it is an incredibly busy, packed show. In fact, we've got a great lineup all day of programmes for you. Now, very shortly, Nigel Farage will address that Reform UK conference in Kemi Badenoch's backyard in Essex. It comes with the news that Reform UK is just 6 points away from becoming the biggest party in Parliament. That's according to an election predictor. The analysis from Electoral Calculus says that Nigel Farage's Farage's party could leapfrog both the Conservatives and Labour. Well, joining me now, or still with me, to be honest with you, is Henry Hill and Chris Worrell. We have the Conservative voice and we have the Labour voice to talk about reform, because both parties, to be honest with you, do seem to be at threat from the incredible rise of Nigel Farage and Reform.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, actually, because Reform are a party of the right, and therefore they do make life exponentially more difficult for the Conservative Party, which even at its previous historic low in 1997, at least had its heartlands which were secure and had the freedom of manoeuvre of not having a party there. On the other hand, I think 100 seats where Reform came second in the general election, 93 of those were Labour. So there is an awful lot more scope, if you're a Reform strategist, for making gains at Labour's expense, because one, you simply have a much bigger battlefield, and two, Labour are in government, right? They're accruing the unpopularity that comes from being in government.
Being in government,
so
yes.
actually, it's an interesting one, because on the one hand, it does pose some challenges for Reform, because the case that you make to try and win over people who voted Tory in 2024, who, let's face it, are the most hardcore committed Tory voters in the country at this point, is probably very different to something that you do to win over Labour voters in those red wall areas. So how does Reform thread that needle? I don't yet know.
OK, and the challenge posed by Reform to Labour cannot be overstated, can it? I mean, you know, Farage's party is now the main challenger to Labour in 89 of their seats.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Don, and I think Henry's made some points there about the Labour seats that are under threat, but, you know, we're seeing very recently, only a year in, you know, Lee Anderson shouting down his own Reform Limited subscribers in the conference yesterday, telling them to shut up and get out after being told to listen to Tommy Robinson. I don't know if the snake's beginning to eat its tail with Elon Musk's side of him, Tommy, and Farage distancing himself. And I think, you know, Henry said earlier off screen about, are they the right-wing Lib Dems? Because you've got Tim Montgomery having a row with Andrea Jenkins over Miriam Cates, who was a Remainer, a Rishi Sunak backer and a net zero supporter, which I think kind of conflicts with a lot of Reform's ideals. So I think they're trying to figure themselves out, and they might be getting themselves in a rock and a hard place.
OK, right, we'll leave you with that rock and a hard place. We have to take a very, very quick break, but we are coming straight back after this.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking across southern parts of Europe for some winter sun on Sunday, and whilst in the west it's going to be quite wet but also relatively warm, a different story further east. Temperatures here around or a touch below average for the time of year, and a mixture of sunny breaks with a few outbreaks of rain. The wettest weather will be pushing across parts of Portugal and into western Spain, but here, like I said, temperatures above average for the time of year. Madeira, for example, getting into the low 20s Celsius. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
British 10-year-old has beaten Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein in an IQ test, would you believe? Genius Krish Arora got the maximum score of 162, which puts him in the top 1% globally.
Goodness me. Well, Krish's parents noticed his brilliant potential after learning he could read fluently by the age of 4.
Krish, how does it feel to be a child genius?
I feel really happy and privileged.
Aww. Do you see it as a gift that you have?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Nichelle, what do you make of your child being a genius? When did it become apparent to you that Krish had something different, something special?
I think at the age of 4, he was doing things that were way beyond and above his age.
Yeah.
He could read fluently, and he could spell correctly, and he was doing complex decimal divisions. So we thought that he's on to something. I think there's a spark out here.
Wow. And how are you reading books, Krish? Did you just pick them up from your mum and dad's bookshelf and just start reading to yourself?
We used to go to the library and we got books.
Such a good tip. Such a good tip as parents.
Yeah.
Head to the library, take your kids to the library.
So, Nichelle, can Krish just do it all? Is he just an all-rounder genius? Every subject, every talent, he can do it all?
Absolutely, and he helps out the family as well. He's been teaching me grade 1 piano, and he hopes, and I repeat, he hopes that I'm going to complete it in 12 months' time. And he also helps out mum, because when mum is teaching his sister, mum sometimes says, Krish, go solve that problem and, help your sister out. So yes, he can do it all.
Krish, you're a superstar.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News. Thank you very much for your company this afternoon. Really appreciate your time, but don't go out, it's cold. Now, very shortly, Nigel Farage will address that Reform UK conference in Kemi Badenoch's own backyard in Essex. Not literally a backyard, obviously. And we'll bring it to you live on GB News. Before we go to that, though, and so while we wait for Nigel, Labour Party activist Chris Worrell and Deputy Editor of Conservative Home Henry Hill
members
are with me still in the studio, talking about the damage that the growth of Reform is doing to both political parties. I mean, as the government at the moment, Labour, are facing a threat to Reform in as many as 89 of your seats, or Labour's seats.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, I think Reform, you've had a sort of incredible growth, cannibalising the Tory party. Like I said, earlier on, we're seeing shooting inside the tent already between Jenkins and Montgomery, and they've only been there a month. We've got Elon Musk kind of getting the alt-right adjacent, already calling for Musk to withdraw support for Farage. So I think that, we're too early on to be calling the destruction of the Labour Party from Reform. Yes, there's big discussions around key issues, as we've been discussing today. But at the end of the day, the Reform are already seeing some wobbly wheels, in my opinion.
OK. Interestingly, though, Henry, coming to you now, I mean, Marco Longhi, who very few people had actually even heard of, but he was the Conservative MP who lost his Dudley North seat in July, has jumped ship now to join Reform from the Conservatives, saying the Conservative Party I once identified as transformed into something unrecognisable. Now, he's obviously not the first. We had Dame Andrea Jenkins, and I think Swilla Braverman's husband has also gone over to the Reform side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested to try and get what that analysis actually is, because presumably he joined the Conservative Party at some point under David Cameron. And the idea that it's transformed away from David Cameron and therefore he's going to join the true Cameroon torchbearers, Reform UK, is a little bit strange. I mean, the question is, one, as you've identified, Reform is still working out what it is. Any party in Britain has to be a relatively broad church party, and Tim Montgomery especially going to have trouble fitting in with some of the other people in Reform UK. But the other one is, with all these members, Reform's not a membership organisation. I had a Reform source I was talking to about this who said they're basically, at the moment, Netflix subscribers, right? They're paying a bit of money to say they like Nigel Farage. The question is, can Reform become a membership movement, right? Can it train these people? Can it organise them? Can it persuade them to go out and do all the unglamorous stuff, door-knocking, canvassing, leafleting, that Labour and Conservative members do?
Interestingly, Zia Youssef did put a shout-out for people to sign up to be the door-knockers. Yeah, activists,
right?
yeah.
Because that's what matters. That's the infantry. The ground game is when membership matters. If they can convert these sign-ups into members, that's a real challenge to both Labour and the Conservatives. If they can't, it's just an ego boost for Nigel.
They're just going to be a right-wing Green Party if they carry on like this. They're all over the place. You've got the sort of ultra-conservative, hyper-nationalists of the Toby Robinson end, feeling like they've been thrown under the bus, stabbed under the back. And then you've got the sort of more one-nation Tories who've, given up on the Tory party, and I don't blame them, that are sort of trying to, move to more centre ground, which, would be better for the country, in my opinion. But, you know, it's all to be played for, to be honest.
Just very quickly, the one, because we are running out of time very quickly, Angela Rayner is tipped to be the one that is going to take on Farage. Do you think she's got it in her?
I'm not going to speculate on new leadership.
Go on, that's what you're here for.
No, not at all. I mean, Keir Starmer's a leader. We're putting a lot of reforms in, and you know, got West Street in there as well. So we can't be.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Henry Hill and Chris Worrell. Thank you for joining me. I've been Dawn Neeson. This has been GB News. Thank you for your company. Don't go anywhere. There's plenty more coming up, including Nigel Farage live. But first, let's get the weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there. It's a cold weekend to come for most, with outbreaks of rain, snow and ice. Amber warnings for snow and ice across parts of England and Wales through this weekend. So there could be some tricky travelling conditions worth checking before leaving the house through this weekend. Low pressure moving in from the southwest, bumping into colder air, leading to that risk of snow and ice, and already rain across the southwest where temperatures are rising, but snow across Wales, the Midlands, down into London, northwards through the evening time, pushing into northern England, eastern England as we head into the early hours. Outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. By the end of the night, temperatures under clear skies well below freezing, -7, -8 Celsius. Icy stretches, but mild across the south. Outbreaks of heavy rain developing here, but it is really the focus of the snow. We do have rain, sleet and snow across northern Scotland. Icy stretches first thing Sunday morning across the country as temperatures are widely below freezing. Icy stretches Northern Ireland, but it's really parts of northern England, North Wales where the snow will be heavy and treacherous, perhaps up to 40 centimetres over the higher ground in places. Rain further south, but leading to the risk of some flooding as the snow melts here. Quite breezy too as the rain continues through the day, but it is really the focus of the snow, particularly across northern England and southern Scotland as we go through the